the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, it is Petrie here, back with you after my day off yesterday. Did anything happen yesterday? I didn't pay any attention. Anyway, I'm back and I'm here with you until 1 o'clock. Thank you very much indeed to Phil and Dave for sitting in for me. Right, so coming up at midnight, as you know, it is the phone in. And when I saw this clip, I think my jaw dropped to the floor, and I wonder if it's had the same effect on you. We're just going to play it to you now because this ties into what I'm talking about at midnight. So here is RFJ Kennedy Jr. RFK Kennedy Jr. Whatever. Anyway, here he is.
Sir, this is an individual tragedy as well. Autism destroys families. More importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are our children. These are children who should not be suffering like this. These are kids who, many of them were fully functional and regressed because of some environmental exposure into autism when they're 2 years old. And these are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. And we have to recognize we are doing this to our children.
So in case you were in any doubt there, what Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Health Secretary in the United States of America, was saying, he was talking about people with autism. They'll never be able to use a toilet on their own. They'll never. And I was so horrified by that because I know people who are on the spectrum of autism, and that is not something I recognise except in the most serious of cases. But he's now saying that he's going to have a cure, or at least know what causes autism by September. This is after years and years of scientific research into the condition. He's referring to it as a disease. He's saying that your life is over if you get an autism diagnosis. And I want to talk to you about this and ask you about your own journey with autism or your children's journey with autism at midnight. Is that what you recognise? Somebody who will never go on a date, never pay taxes, and never do anything worthwhile. They're a burden to society. They'll never even be able to use a toilet on their own. I'd love to hear from you on this because I find this sort of narrative really, really dangerous. And he's saying that more and more people are being diagnosed, but that's because diagnostics have also got better. And they're able to diagnose earlier now as well. So it wasn't that these children were perfectly functional before the age of 2 and then suddenly were not functional. It's because at the age of 2, this is when developmental markers begin to show. This is when talking is a thing, walking is a thing, right? Before then, it can take children different lengths of time to do it. So this is where you can see the developmental markers. So I don't know who is advising Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I mean, there speaks a man quite clearly who has some neurological issues, and they were self-inflicted by heroin. But anyway, this man is now the health secretary and is looking into this and says he'll have an answer for what autism is by September, what causes it by September, despite decades of research and scientists getting a bit closer to trying to figure it out. But anyway, I want to know if that's what you recognise by an autism diagnosis. Perhaps you're somebody who's high functioning and living and working, paying taxes. Maybe you're married. Maybe you've got children of your own. Maybe you have been on a date and maybe you can use the toilet unaided. Give me a call. 0344 499 1000. So that's what I'm going to be talking about at midnight. Before that, between 11 and 12, we have the fabulous Vincent Moss. He's going to be here to go through the newspapers for Wednesday. Johnny Hearn is here talking us through some movies, and also Anna Webb is a cat and dog behavioural expert. So if you've got any issues with your cat or your dog you'd like me to ask, send me a text, the word talk, and then your message to 87222, and I will be able to ask Anna Webb questions for you. But before that, back to the autism story. The University of Nevada, Las Vegas researchers have found a molecular connection between autism and myotonic dystrophy and believe that people with DM1 may be 14 times more likely to be autistic. However, it's not conclusive because there are people with DM1 who are not autistic at all. So it is a very confusing situation, but the fact that we might have an answer by September, I think, is naive, if not just plain stupid. This follows the US Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who pledged massive research effort to determine the cause of autism by September this year. He warned that children are diagnosed at an alarming rate, as the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention found that 1 in 31 children are autistic. Of course, they broadened the term as well to include much milder cases. But experts have pointed out that the higher reported cases could also be because of diagnostics. So it's easy to see which way that RFK Jr. is planning to go, because he's employed somebody who is a vaccine skeptic. Not only a vaccine skeptic, but the man himself was found to be prescribing. He didn't have no medical background at all, but he was prescribing very strange things to parents of autistic children, like drinking watered down bleach, for example. So, and this person has been brought in to help with this study. So it's all very, very worrying at the moment. But let's talk to Raj Paso, who's a consultant psychiatrist and broadcaster. Raj, it's been a very long time. It's good to see you.
Yes, nice to talk to you again as well.
Now, listen, Raj, look, what are the chances of finding out what causes autism by September?
Slim to non-existent. And like you, my jaw hit the ground when I saw RFK talking in this way and talking about how autistic people wouldn't be able to do this, wouldn't be able to do that. I wondered if he'd got a bit confused with severe learning disability, which is a completely different thing. I mean, I was just dumbstruck. One way of thinking about autism, by the way, is the very good film Rain Man, where Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise. Dustin Hoffman doesn't do a bad performance, and in that film, this man goes on a date, for example, helps Tom Cruise win lots of money in a casino because he has a special skill, and many autistic people have special skills in particular areas where he can count into a deck of cards. I don't recommend that people go to a casino and do this, but the film was not a bad portrayal, and clearly Dustin Hoffman had many qualities. He did have a restricted interest, which is something that some people with autism have, and there is a spectrum. There's maybe the severe end and the milder end. And it wasn't a bad description. In the film, Dustin Hoffman has to watch a particular TV show, Jeopardy, at a particular time of day. And that was quite a nice way of describing the fact that people with autism often don't like change and like to do the same thing at the same time again and again and again, et cetera, et cetera. But it doesn't mean they're disabled. They're usually, I've met many professors at universities who actually are somewhere on the autistic spectrum disorder. So, you know, I found that not only astonishing in the way you did, but also dangerous in the way that I think you did, because it seems to be down a road of stigmatizing a group of people. But, you know, this is the populist politician playbook, right, which is find something people are already anxious about, make them more anxious, and then suggest a very simple answer, which most intelligent people realize has no chance of working. But this is the populist politician playbook in action. We've seen again and again from these people.
But you've got a situation here where already autism was blamed on vaccines. So we know now that Andrew Wakefield faked his results. He actually lied. So anybody who still believes, and 800 studies have been done into Wakefield claims about the MMR vaccine, and not one of them could replicate, and not one of them could prove his theory right. And they went into it not to prove him wrong, but to prove him right, okay, because that was the way the scientists decided they were going to do it. Not one study found any link whatsoever, but that damage has already been done. And then you get RFK Jr, who is a vaccine skeptic himself. He's being blamed at the moment for the increase in measles, which is sweeping through the Midwest and killing children. And he's also employed somebody who was a quack, who's been advising parents on a regime of very dangerous toxins for their autistic child to take in order to cure their autism. I mean, where do we go with that? Because there are people, presumably, who will agree and think that autism is something that can be cured.
Well, I agree with you completely. Lots of studies have been done where they compare children who had a vaccination with children who were never vaccinated, and no studies have been able to find any concrete evidence that vaccination is linked to a rise in autism. I'll tell you a big irony about that, because vaccination rates have gone down because actually a lot of people have been very affected by these conspiracy theories and therefore were reluctant to get their children vaccinated. How do you square that with the argument that autism is, rampantly on the increase? So you've got vaccination rates going down.
Very good. Yeah.
But autism's climbing ever higher and higher. It doesn't quite make sense, right? Now, the other point that I think you made, and I want to just emphasize that point a bit more, is it's highly likely this environmental toxin theory, which is popular because of this idea that autism is spreading like an epidemic, it is far more likely that very basic things happen. In the last 40 years or so, we got more interested in children, right? We paid more attention to them. I remember when I was growing up, children were seen and not heard, that kind of approach. But we're much more invested in our children. We pay more attention. And maybe as a result, the diagnosis is going up because basically it's about a diagnostic phenomenon to do with the criteria, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, it's not like it's a COVID disorder that's spreading rampantly in the population. It was probably always there. We're just becoming more aware of it. And that's why it's climbing. But another problem is because there's a bit of panic about autism, which I think these politicians are exploiting very cleverly. Clinicians are overwhelmed now, right, with parents trying to get a diagnosis or panicked about a diagnosis. So what happens is that you get a very long waiting list. And then because the parents are anxious about this, they go to a very dodgy clinic that costs them lots of money and get a diagnosis. These clinics love to make the diagnosis. They tend to just buckle to the parental pressure. So there's something else going on here, which we should make people aware of, which is beware that the diagnosis, there's no blood test for it. You want a very careful clinician to carefully assess your child and over a period of time, take a very careful history, do some questionnaires, interview the parents, and that process takes a while. And there are a lot of dodgy clinics willing to hand out a diagnosis at very short notice. So people should be aware of that. There's no blood test. So the clinical judgment end, you require a clinician who's going to make an intelligent judgment and assess your child properly. So there's that's going on as well, I think.
So, I mean, look, decades of research have gone into autism, and as yet it has not been determined exactly why some people might present with autism and some people might not. But is that true of all sort of neurodivergence? I mean, I said, here he was, RFK, saying, they were normal until they were 2 and then they regress. But that's the marker of development, isn't it? Around the age of 2, you start to notice whether they're talking or walking or doing all those things. So that's just purely coincidental, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think he's getting confused with severe IQ deficiency or learning disability. There's no evidence that people with autism have a problem with learning or with intelligence. They normally have a normal IQ. The issue is very subtle, and it's to do with the ability to think about how other people are thinking. It's sometimes called mind blindness. So a really good way of explaining it is around 4 years old, you tell the child the story of Little Red Riding Hood, okay? Little Red Riding Hood goes to visit her grandma. Unfortunately, it's not her grandma anymore. There's a wolf lying in the bed dressed up like the grandmother, okay? That's how the story goes. Now, most 4-year-olds can understand, right, that Little Red Riding Hood thinks it's their grandmother, and actually it's a wolf, because that's the way the story goes. Autistic children, because the story is that the person telling the story and the person listening to the story, that it's actually a wolf, can't understand how Red Riding Hood doesn't spot immediately it's a wolf, right?
Right.
So it's about perspective taking. It's about the fact that people with autism have a little bit of difficulty taking another person's perspective. But this is a subtle thing and can be trained. People can have training, social skills training, it's called, and can, overcome the problem or compensate for it and lead completely normal lives. So there was a sense in which this was like creating a panic. And I think these politicians love to create a panic. And I think that was what was going on here.
But I mean, the description, that is so hurtful to a lot of people. I mean, it's despicable to other people, because we know there's a spectrum, and we know that spectrum has actually been broadened out. It's been widened out because it was determined that they weren't catching enough people who, as you were just saying, might need a smiley face chart or a sad face just to recognize other people's emotions. But that's all learnable, that's all teachable. But this is a massive spectrum, and RFK is going right to the very far end of the spectrum, where yes, indeed, there will be people who need support, but so do other people. This othering constantly, and this saying it's a disease. Disease is a really nasty ring to it, and I just think it must have offended so many people who are living with autism, who know that they have a shortfall in empathy, maybe, or in understanding a conversation. But they're working at it, and they've got a job, and they're paying tax, and they sure as hell know how to use a toilet on their own.
Yeah, but also people with autism often have greater strengths in certain areas than people without autism, as the film Rain Man quite clearly explains. Dustin Hoffman is better at maths, okay, than Tom Cruise, okay? And actually, if you go to university faculties of engineering, physics and mathematics, you will find very high rates of autism, and the research has demonstrated that, because autistic people are often better at understanding systems, okay, and are attracted to systems in that way compared to the rest of us. So it shouldn't be seen as a deficit, it's a difference. And often they have strengths. They're better at certain things than people without autism. So again, there was a sense in which there's a nuanced understanding of this thing, which is complex, that he was just skating over dramatically. And therefore, the chances of him finding a cause, given cause for what, is a real interesting question, is very worrying. But what's really very worrying as well is, given he already knows he's going to find a cause by September, it's like he knows the results of the research. You're meant to do research in a slightly more open-minded manner, I think. He already knows the results, right?
Yeah,
before he's even done the research. That's like really worrying, I think.
Well, yeah, because it's predetermined, isn't it? And a lot of people are suggesting, well, he'll put it down to vaccines because he's an anti-vaxxer. But there was also that artist, wasn't there? That young black guy who could look at a landscape like London, even from a helicopter, and then go home, and he did pencil and pen drawings. They're absolutely exquisite, and every single bump and window was in these images, because he was able to just, for some reason, his brain was just able to remember absolutely everything. So you get a lot of people in arts as well, and lots of people in computing these days as well, who are able to read computer language like it was English.
Yeah. So basically, all people with autism have issues to do with getting on with other people, with thinking about how other people think, but they have strengths. I mean, another great strength of people with autism is they find it very difficult to lie. So they're fantastic employees because they don't lie, and they don't even understand often what a lie is, and they're just not drawn to it, right? They're incredibly honest people. So again, another point that they have many, many great strengths as a result. The rates of autism are significantly higher so far, according to research, in men compared to women. So another way of thinking about it is called the extreme male brain. men are drawn to mechanical objects, for example. And often men are less good at thinking about what other people are thinking in the way that women are.
Yeah.
Another really interesting observation is people with autism don't pay a lot of attention to people's eyes. And we both know that often one of the ways you can work out what people are thinking is by watching their eyes and looking at what they're looking at, right? So if you're a wife, sorry, gory example, of a husband, and some attractive woman walks in and the guy is just immediately flicks his eyes over, you pick that up, right? And so that's an example of the kind of thing that people who are socially skilled pick up very quickly. What are people looking at? Oh, you just looked at your watch. Does that mean you're bored? People with autism tend not to be so skilled in that area of eye contact and gaze. What does gaze mean? But it doesn't mean they're learning disabled. It just means they have strengths elsewhere.
Yeah.
We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses.
What would you say to a parent that has perhaps just had a child diagnosed with autism, and as yet the future isn't written right, so they don't know how it's going to impact that child, and they see somebody who's the health secretary of the United States of America saying what he said about autism? I mean, that would be terrifying, right?
Oh, I agree, absolutely. And again, because of the long waiting list, people often get a lot of support. They only have a very short time in the clinic, but to be properly explained. And there's a lot of nonsense on the internet. If you just Google autism, you'll get a lot of nonsense. It's very difficult. People can feel very isolated. But basically, this man is not an expert. He's not a doctor. He doesn't seem to be interested in what scientists and experts and doctors really think. But I would take what he said with a small, strong sense of skepticism. And also, I think you're right. The other thing that was very worrying was he was presenting a kind of hopeless. It's a really hopeless thing if you got this thing, right? Which is just not true at all. Absolutely not true at all. Many people do very well with autism. It's just they're different, that's all. And these differences can be accommodated and can be overcome. And they have many strengths as well.
Raj, it's always such a joy. Let's not leave it as long till we speak again. Thank you very much indeed. Raj Baso there, consultant psychiatrist and broadcaster. Taking a break, back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and a good evening to you. So coming up at midnight, we're going to be talking about autism. And RFK Jr, who is the Health Secretary to the United States of America, has described autism as a preventable disease. Although researchers and scientists have identified genetic factors that are associated with it, a disease is something, it's catchable, right? You can't catch autism. Autism is not considered a disease, but a complex disorder that affects the brain. Cases range widely in severity, with symptoms that can include delays in language, learning and social or emotional skills, and some autistic traits can go unnoticed well into adulthood, by which time you've probably been able to use the toilet by yourself. So the image that RFK Jr. gave was that you're basically just this nothing. You'll never pay taxes, you'll never go on a date, you'll never write a poem, which is oddly specific, and you can't use the toilet by yourself. Now, in some cases, that will be true. That will be true of people with the most severe autism. But it is not true of the condition itself. It is not an inevitability. It's not something like MS that presents and then gets worse through the years, right? It's not something that you suddenly develop at the age of 2. And he was suggesting that people before the age of 2 were completely fine and then they get autism. That's not the case. It's just around that age, that is when the developmental markers are the most noticeable. So people will start to notice, parents will start to notice that their child isn't engaging in a way that other children at the age of 2 might engage. Maybe they don't understand empathy. Maybe they don't understand, taking toys off another child is upsetting. It's things like that. You start to notice their social skills and their dexterity and walking and all of those things at around the age of 2, which coincidentally is around the age when the MMR vaccine is usually given, or the second one anyway. So a lot of people went, oh, well, it's MMR. It's MMR then. Well, that was completely debunked. I can't tell you how much that was debunked. There were 800 studies into Wakefield, each one of them trying to prove him right, and they couldn't do it. So they weren't trying to prove him wrong because they felt scientifically that that wasn't the best way to go about it. What we're going to do is we're going to look at his research and we're going to prove him right, because that's the easiest thing to do. Couldn't do it. Plus the fact he had faked it. He had faked his research. He had lied because he was in the pocket of a pharmaceutical company who wanted to give individual vaccines. So he has been absolutely, globally, just made a laughing stock of. And yet people still cannot get away from thinking the vaccine caused it. And again, it's because around that time, that's when developmental issues will start to show themselves. So it has been a heck of a journey with autism. I've covered it for many, many years. And I find it so disrespectful and dangerous what RFK Jr. has said about people with autism, because it is a spectrum. It's a neurodivergent spectrum. So I know lots of people with autism who are working in computing or are brilliant film directors because they never miss a shot, or they're brilliant mathematicians, and they are paying tax. And by the way, I've never had to help one of them to the toilet. So let's talk about autism and your journey with it. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a very good evening to you. This is Talk, and it's Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. Now, many of you will know, if you were watching over the last couple of weeks, that I have a new puppy. I have a new member of the Hosken family. He is Humphrey Hosken, who is not with me this evening because my sister is staying. So she's dog sitting for Humphrey and Bailey at the moment. And so I just thought it was a good opportunity because she got in about 2 hours after I left. So it was like, good, they can be on their own together for 2 hours. And then she's going to be there, so it's not a long time, etc., etc. So I left them alone on Friday and they seem to be fine together. Anyway, that's just the Humphrey update. I am bringing him in tomorrow, by the way, though. I know. The most adorable little creature ever. But of course, he needs training. Now, this last weekend, I managed to teach him to sit for a treat and to even not reach up for the treat. So he had to remain with his bottom on the ground for his treat, and he did that. And I've also trained him to do a circle before sitting and then doing a treat. So we've got that far. He knows his name already. He's very smart, not like my other dog, who is all heart. But we've still got an issue with some accidents that are happening. So because I love dogs, and I know you do too, and cats, we decided to do a little section on this. And Anna Webb joins me now, who is a cat and dog behaviour expert and host of a Dog's Life podcast. And it looks brilliant. I've looked at all the guests that she has, and training your dog and all of those things as well. I've got the list of podcasts. I will be definitely listening to those. Anna, thank you for joining me. Right, so Humphrey isn't here today, but he's a very sweet little nearly 10-week-old Shih Tzu puppy. Very smart. But how quickly should he be not having accidents?
You know what? Oh, thanks for having me on, Petrie. Having the accidents, I find it quite frustrating that the focus of dog training with puppies tends to go from, like you've just said, mastering the first 6th day, which, it's fantastic, to really being a bit overwhelmed and too focused on the accidents. Now, it's important to understand that puppies don't get full control of their bladder until they're 22 weeks old.
No.
Yeah. So it's all about, building a very repetitive structure to your puppy's day in a way. Puppies need a huge amount of sleep, Petrie, because when they're sleeping, they're growing, and they have to grow at a very fast rate, compared to us humans, not only emotionally, but physically and cognitively. There's so much to get done. Your little Humphrey, he's at the peak time now of absorbing everything in his environment, good things and bad things, everything, because he's in the very vital stage called the imprinting stage that wears off at around about 7 months, and that coincides with Humphrey turning into a teenager. So, bringing a puppy into your life is, understanding all these different stages that they go through, and indeed your whole dog's life stages, from being a puppy to being a senior. It's something dog owners, Petrie, as you'll know, we have to go through all of this, and it happens a lot quicker in dogs, than it does in people. So on the accidents front, the thing is to remember that after he's been asleep, which should be for 3/4 of the day, it's important to take him straight outside into your garden and build a cue. It can be go pee, be quick, hurry up. You can say anything you want, really, to be the cue phrase for him to go and do a pee or go and do a number 2. Stay out in the garden with him until he's done it. Be armed with lots of fresh chicken or a bit of cheese to quickly, really positively reinforce that toilet break, yeah? And just repeat. So after every sleep, it's take him straight outside, then bring him in. Then it's the time to do about a 15-minute minute, very focused play and training routine where you're doing your sits, you're doing your downs, you're beginning to do a little stay, and you're really focusing on the recall, you know, the come here command, because that could save his life one day. That's what's really important when you begin to take him out and about into the park. Not yet, of course, because he hasn't had his second vaccination, but that's coming up, I would think, in 2 weeks' time.
That's
a week
right,
after that, you know, you're all clear to take him out on the pavement. So in advance of that moment, you still have about a 3-week window, Petrie, to be practicing on a collar and lead up and down your hall, around the garden, back through into your kitchen. I don't know the layout of your home, but practicing and teaching him the stay by my leg cue, the heel cue, teaching him fun things like head up, which is a very easy cue to teach, and means that every time you go, Humphrey, head up, he's going to look up at you. And that could be brilliant when you see a chicken bone ahead of you on the pavement and you don't want him having that chicken bone. Get his attention, his head's up looking at you. You can turn him in a different direction, you know, avoid, you know, a big boisterous dog, you know, galloping down the pavement in front of you, you know, or a cyclist or a jogger, or, you know, anything that might intimidate him. Because it's important that all these experiences, when you do take him out into the big wide world, you know, are positive. It's not always possible, but it's about, you know, understanding how to guide him and learn all about the myriad of stimulus, you know, that is in London.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I hadn't thought about putting him on a lead around the garden. So that's really helpful, actually. So I should definitely do that. He has an older dog with him, his big brother, obviously, because I just turned them both into children. Bailey, who's the same breed but 11 years old. And currently, what is the process? I mean, look, currently, Bailey is sort of disinterested. He never growls at him. He doesn't do anything. He can get up on the sofa. Humphrey's too tiny, so that's Bailey's safe space. I allow him to have that. But at what point will they start to like each other? I mean, Humphrey's wild about Bailey, loves him, but Bailey's not really that bothered.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I've got the picture. Okay, so a number of things here. It's that old trick in the old book to bring a younger dog in to put extra life and a bit of va-va-voom back into the older dog. So I think what you've done is a really good tactic. Now, obviously, Bailey's nose is going to be well out of sorts at the moment, Petrie. He'll be like, who on earth are you? You are in my house. I hate you. You're taking mum away from me. So it's very important to balance all of this and make sure that Bailey is getting a lot of one-to-one attention from you to just counter any feelings of, hating the puppy, basically. It's also important for little Humphrey not to be too overzealous with Bailey. So if Humphrey, for example, starts to pull at his ear or maybe starts nipping at his legs as a way of kind of encouraging Bailey to maybe have a bit of a rough and tumble play, that's when it's good to correct Humphrey and guide him away and put him into a dog bed, give him something like an interactive toy, maybe filled with a bit of chicken to keep him occupied, take his energy away from Bailey and channel this energy into something more constructive, like chewing. At the moment, Humphrey's got these like needle sharp puppy teeth, which hurt. They hurt humans. They also hurt adult dogs. So bear that in mind as well. And those needle teeth, he's teething. So to give him lots of appropriate things to chew on, that so that he's doing that kind of activity rather than just thinking, "Hey, I'm young. Come on, Bailey, you've got to play with me. I'm the golden boy. You're the old man." We don't want any of that going on. So it's about managing them and making sure the attention is split evenly between them.
Okay. The other thing is, of course, with these needle teeth, if I'm stroking him or playing with him or tickling his tummy or whatever, he will try and bite my fingers. Now, I don't want to encourage that. Obviously, that's not play as far as I'm concerned. What is the best way to stop that?
Well, when he starts, I mean, it's also, well, a number of things. It could be a sign that he's overtired. Okay. So that's like a clue for you to think, okay, Humphrey, it's time for you to go to bed now. It's very important also for Humphrey to spend time alone, because this is the point, you know, it's the imprinting phase where you can actually, by accident, train a dog to have separation anxiety. So if the puppy's around you the whole time, if he's being particularly clingy and you're rewarding that kind of clinginess, then that, you know, is a recipe potentially for a bit of disaster in the future. Okay. For me, I would, if a puppy's really biting hard, you know, possibly making your fingers bleed, scratching you, that's a sign they're overtired. They need to go and rest and be alone for about 2 hours, and then calm down, absorb everything from the day. Dogs need to think, and thinking time is really important for dogs at this stage. So he'll probably need 2 hours rest. That's an opportunity for you to spend time with Bailey. You'll be exhausted, Petrie.
I know, I already am.
Then Bailey will be tired, and then it'll be time for Humphrey to wake up. So he goes straight into the garden, does his pee on cue, on a lead. Then you bring him in, do a bit of activity, playing with a rope toy. I love old-fashioned, really simple rope toys that you can like wiggle on the floor and make them into a snake, and then get the puppy to come pounce on it.
Yes, I've got one of those. It's his favourite. It is his favourite toy. But he does steal Bailey's toys as well, which I'm trying to have to manage as well. But I suppose it's like having you know, a baby and a toddler, right? So yeah, absolutely. And I always recommend, it's also a tidying thing, have a toy box. So all the toys go into the toy box, and then as you know, you're engaging, say, Bailey with a toy, take him to the toy box, make a big deal of going, oh, Bailey, should we play with this one? Should we play with the dinosaur now? Or do you want to just play fetch with your ball? You know, make a big thing of it. So it's kind of, you know, camping it up a little bit for him, so he thinks it's more fun. And the same again, of course, with Humphrey. Once he's finished playing with his toys, put them away. The only toys I like to be left on the floor are things to chew on. So I like natural things, like maybe a stag antler or a yak chew. I love, you know, I won't mention the bee-shaped interactive toy that's got a very erratic bounce. I think everyone one it is, that one. That I mean, that's great. And you could do all sorts of things with that. You can put a bit of banana in there, pop it in your freezer for an hour, so it comes out as banana sorbet, which is lovely for a puppy who's teething because it's cooling and soothing on the mouth. So there's all that sort of aspect to think of, different fillings for the bouncy erratic toy. And then you're engaging with them. So playtime with toys should be a two-way street. You're involved and the puppy's involved. So it's an interactive session where you're teaching the puppy life skills, not to be too boisterous, not to be too grabby with the toy, and then building it in with a bit of a sit, bit of a down, you know, even teach him a little rollover at this point. And of course, the boundaries, like making a meal out of meal times, try and get Humphrey to sit and wait as you put his bowl of food. I do that.
That's really great. Then give him the release cue, take it. So you're setting these real building blocks in place, but make it fun and always do it positively.
This is wonderful stuff. You're amazing. This is great. And I know that you've got some teaching tools on your website as well, haven't you?
Yes. Lots of things. Lots of information from, you know, leading lights in dog behavior, you know, on my podcast. Lots of health tips as well. Lots of advice on nutrition. It's really all my experience over, well, a lifetime, really, because I was very lucky. I grew up with dogs from the word dot, you know, but in the last 25 years.
It's amazing. It's wonderful. Yeah, I've really enjoyed that. I could talk to you for hours, but Anna, thank you so much. Anna Webb there, cat and dog behavior expert and host of a Dog's Life podcast.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it's Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock, and with me right now is Johnny Hearn, filmmaker, broadcaster and Talk film reporter. You've got a couple of movies for us.
Hello, yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. What have you got?
So I'm going to start off with a new film from Ryan Coogler. Now, who's he, you might ask?
I was literally just about to say that.
Ryan Coogler is the writer-director behind Black Panther, also the Creed films, and brilliantly, his debut film, Fruitvale Station, which I remember seeing about 10 years ago and reviewing, and absolutely loving it. And I remember saying this is going to be a director to watch, and I've followed his career ever since, because he's just turned out some brilliant films. So this is the newest one from him. It's very, very different from his normal kind of film. So it's set in 1932 in Mississippi, and it centres around two cousins. One's called Smoke and one's called Stack, both of whom played by Michael B. Jordan, by the way. Which I didn't realise when I was watching it, actually. I was trying to work out who the other actor was.
Oh, really?
I was like, well, that's definitely Michael Jordan. Anyway, and so they've been in Chicago and they've sort of worked for the mob and whatever, and they've made a bit of money, and they come back to where they grew up, and they decide that they want to open a kind of a bar, a Duke joint, as they call it. And so they set about setting it all up with spending money around in the town and having this big grand opening night. As part of that, their younger cousin is going to play some music for them. But what they don't realise is, and the whole premise of the film is, that if there's a certain type of music performance, that if you play it so purely and so naturally, it can break down the barriers between the past, the future and the present, and open up sort of portals to other dimensions. And this young lad plays at this opening night this brilliant
It's a
sort of
documentary
blues,
then. It's a true story.
brilliant blues music, and in doing so invokes these dark spirits led by Jack O'Connell, which if you're going to have a dark spirit coming to stalk you, then Jack O'Connell is probably one of the scarier ones, I could imagine.
It's an interesting. Is it from a book?
No.
It's just okay. Look, let's have a look at or a listen to the trailer. So this is Sinners. It's a 15, and it's 2 hours 17 in cinemas right now. It's creepy.
It is creepy. It starts off. It's not creepy to start off with. It just sort of grows, becomes ever more creepy. The second half of the film is the sort of the horror, creepy side of it. The first half is just this sort of quite pleasant domestic sort of story about people in 1932 in Mississippi and setting up of a club. So it does kind of creep up on you that it then does change in the middle. Interestingly, he cites films like The Faculty and From Dusk Till Dawn, a couple of Roberto Rodriguez films there that are like that they start off as one thing and then they sort of twist in the middle and descend into this sort of horror madness kind of
I'm not
things.
good with horrors, as you know.
You'd love the first half of it.
Okay. I just have to know when to switch
Well, when
off.
Jack O'Connell turns up, then you want to stop watching.
Then I want to stop. Okay, then I want to stop. Okay, so what about Warfare?
Well, Warfare is it's a film by a guy called Ray Mendoza. Now, he was a former Navy SEAL, and he went into movies basically as a stuntman to start with. And he's written this film based on an incident that he was involved with when a group of Navy SEALs they took up positions in Iraq just to observe sort of sniper positions of a military operation that was going to happen, and they came under attack from some dissidents in the local area, and they were pinned down in this house in the middle of Iraq and awaiting to be evacuated, but they couldn't be because they were being overwhelmed. It's a little bit kind of like Black Hawk Down, but Navy SEALs in a house. And so the whole film is based entirely on the memories of the people that were in this.
It's based on truth.
Based on truth.
Wow. Every
single scene, every single moment that's in this film has been verified by at least 2 of the Navy SEALs that were in there. And so it's co-written by him and Alex Garland, who wrote the brilliant Civil War film last year, which was one of my favourite films of last year. Absolutely brilliant. And interestingly, it's also told in real time. So it's an hour and a half long, but the story is an hour and a half long, and it's not done like a normal war film. You don't get any music. There's no music in it, apart from the very beginning. There's a little bit of music, but there's no music throughout the movie. And everything is sort of filmed from as though you're part of them. You're, you know, sort of almost like a documentary style, that you're there with them as it's happening. And it's, you know, it's just a very kind of gritty, warts and all story about, you know, what happens in these kinds of situations when it all goes wrong.
The real dirt.
The real dirt and sweat.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I think is missing from a lot of war films. This looks absolutely brilliant, actually. So it's Warfare 15. It's only an hour 35, as you said. It's in cinemas right now. Let's have a look or a listen.
Redman 08 is profane. We're seeing activity converging to your north and south.
This is Frogman 6 Romeo. We need evac at our last known position. We have severely wounded. Who's severely wounded? It's not you. It's me. Who is it? No, it's not you. No, it's it.
Copy, one word, contact 2.
You coming to you or you coming to us?
Stand by. We'll let you know when we're inbound.
Let's move!
Here's the plan. EA 5 minutes, over.
The scouts are gonna lead us out, and I'm bringing up the rear. Pop smoke. Smoke out. We are all coming back. Look for the blood in the smoke.
Multiple bad guys trying to get to our position.
Inbound! Inbound! Find cover! 1 minute out!
We have enemy on our building and all surrounding buildings.
Roger that. Stand by. Going hot.
We gotta get ready, man. This is gonna hurt.
On my count. 1, 2, 3.
That looks brilliant.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable.
Gritty. Yeah, I'm
it's
sure.
uncomfortable to
War
watch.
is uncomfortable, and a lot of people watching movies about it or playing games about it don't realise.
Yeah, and I actually become more uncomfortable when I see films that glamorise war, and this doesn't at all. And you know, it's very good. It's very well done. It was shot in chronological order, which means that you can really kind of, you don't have to worry about.
15 seems a little like younger people could go and see. That's probably not a younger person's movie.
I mean, thematically, no, but there's not a lot of sort of blood and gore in that kind of sense.
Yeah, but still
that's
quite
why
disturbing.
it's only 15. It's disturbing, yes, but it's not it's not actually very violent. But there is, you know, it's more
a lot of adult themes in that.
Adult themes,
and of course, Pope movies, because Conclave. I mean, must have done that recently.
Conclave has suddenly had a resurgence.
This is the recent film.
The recent film with Ray Fiennes, absolutely brilliant film, one of my favourite films of last year. Won an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay, and tells the story of what happens during the conclave to elect a new
which will be
pope,
happening
which will
next
be happening
week.
in a couple of weeks, and but it's also it's a thriller as well between the different factions of which of the cardinals is going to be pope and how they're going to change the Catholic Church depending on which one gets it. So it's a really good film, really good film. Not 100% accurate,
no,
but still a brilliant movie. So that has seen a great resurgence. I think that's coming back on Netflix. So if you've not seen it, it's a really good chance to watch this movie because it's fantastic.
And everyone will be I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it will be an insight, even though it's a drama. It's an insight. What else have we got?
Well, there's The Two Popes, which was out a couple of years ago, which is the story about when Pope Benedict became. Renounced the pontiff and became resigned, and Pope Francis, I'm going to try and get their names in the right order, took over. And so it's a film with Anthony Hopkins, who plays Pope Benedict, and Jonathan Pryce, who plays Pope Francis, the one who's just died. And it's a really funny, actually very funny film. With you imagine the two of them. It's
I can imagine.
So
That's absolutely. And very quickly,
well, there was a film in America. It's called The Pope Must Diet. Now there was one letter less in the English version of that, which is a very, very funny film. If you can find it somewhere, it's worth watching with Robbie Coltrane. It's a little bit naughty.
Johnny, thank you. Back in a moment.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good to have your company, and with us for the next hour is the fabulous Vincent Moss, former political editor. And I was just explaining to him about Humphrey not being in, because you've got your lovely dog, haven't you, as well? And we're just both dog crazy.
Yeah, literally. Yes,
literally, yeah. So, listen, before we get into the papers, I don't know if you saw the US Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. when he was talking about autism. And he described people with autism as being, unable to pay taxes, go on dates, write poetry for some bizarre reason, or even be able to take themselves to the toilet. Basically describing autism as a disease, and that he's going to know exactly what causes it by September. My concern when I read that, my jaw dropped to the floor, because I know people with autism who are very high functioning, or even just having a normal-ish life. They might not have much empathy, or they might whatever. But to hear that sort of description is very unhelpful.
Hugely unhelpful and really simplistic, because there's a huge spectrum of needs. There are some people who never live independent lifestyles, and there are some, as you say, that are very high functioning and very intelligent people. So it's really unfair, but it's very much out of his playbook, because we've seen this before with him over his warnings about vaccines and suggesting that vaccines are a lot more dangerous than they are. And I think there was this issue with measles. So he is he was obviously a Trump appointment and very popular in some circles, but he's saying some really, really risky things that will be very damaging potentially to healthcare in America. And of course, people listen to America, and it poses risks in other countries as well. Exactly, and to refer to it as a disease, I mean, a disease is something that you contract or you catch, right? Neurodiversity is not something that you catch or contract. It is something that is in either in your genetics, or you're born with it, or things like that. I just find it so, I don't know. I mean, I thought we were better than this now. I thought we had more understanding of neurodivergence, and that people were not all the same. We were never all the same anyway. But that people have different skills and different abilities, and that is true also of autism. Very much so. It makes you wonder where he gets his information from, whether he's just putting things into Google, or he's reading the wrong people on the internet. He's not reading science. No, exactly, sure. Because I mean, this is the sort of, bear in mind that he's appointment by Trump, who thought that bleach could cure COVID. So there's a whole cabal of, Trump has appointed people around him who are like-minded, and their view about medicine and science and things like that is pretty much from the same sort of playbook, really. And I think with some areas that doesn't matter potentially too much. If you've got different views on culture, it might not agree with them, but they're potentially not that damaging. But when it comes to health, these are things that could jeopardise potentially, not the autism one potentially, but it promotes bad misunderstanding about the people who've got autism. But certainly with the vaccines and things like that, this could cause huge health problems. Well, people are dying. Kids are dying in Texas. Yeah, they are. From measles. Yeah. But also, it's coming from a man who was a heroin addict, who has clearly got neurological issues of some description. That doesn't stop him being the Secretary of Health, right? I mean, I would have thought he'd be more understanding of people with a different working brain. You'd think so, and what it doesn't seem to be happening a lot at the moment is, where are the voices that should be challenging them? And I don't know. I think people are afraid to speak up because they know that they will pretty much, Trump has made it clear he's happy to sack pretty much anybody. So if you are somebody in the position of sort of authority in perhaps public health care in America, you're thinking, well, I do need to speak up against this, but I will lose my job probably. And that's not a great place to be either, because Trump this time round is really not tolerating any opposition to any of his policies. Yeah, it's really interesting actually, Vincent, because this morning my producer Gabriella and I were setting the programme up and discussing what
what we wanted to do and all of those things. And we hit on this because it really impacted me, that thing that he said about autism and autistic people. It really resonated with me. It really hurt. And we were talking, and she said, "Oh, I'll try and get." She said to me, she said, "It's a pity, isn't it, that we're both thinking the same thing, is we can't really reach out to get a US guest because they'll probably be sacked if we get them." And we both went, "Oh my God, we've never had that conversation before." Saying in order to protect somebody from the United States of America, we better not invite them onto this programme to talk against RFK Jr.
That's right, and people are worried.
What world are we in?
It's a crazy world when it comes to America. People are now worried about what they put on their social media and what they have on their phones if they're going to be visiting America. Exactly, because they're worried that if they get to the point of immigration, people look at their phones. If there's critical remarks there about the president or the current administration, they might not be allowed into America. So it's a pretty dangerous world. And for somebody that says he's a champion of free speech, it's pretty astonishing that so many people are worried about speaking up.
Yeah, well, they're going to lose $92 billion worth of tourism this year.
Yeah,
just this year.
Wow.
Because people are not going.
Yeah.
And other countries are now advising people to take burner phones. And now, just because you take a burner phone, ICE is suggesting that if you're taking a burner phone, you've got something to hide, and therefore they're going to arrest you anyway.
Yeah, lose-lose.
So you can't win.
No, exactly.
I mean, I wouldn't be allowed in. There's too much publicly out there about what I've been saying. I would definitely not be allowed, which is, you couldn't pay me at the moment to go to America, which is a real pity because I planned to go to New York with my son.
It is, but it's a frightening place. If you don't like the look of you, you can be potentially deported without trial to El Salvador. So all sorts of things can happen.
People go missing and they end up somewhere that they shouldn't be, and not returned. Anyway, let's have a look at this is the Mercury News. I don't know where in America that is, but anyway, it's the Mercury News, and our US paper. First Latin American pontiff dies of a stroke. Francis remembered for humility and pushing for church reforms. Much being said that J.D. Vance was the last person to see the Pope, but the Pope did not give him a proper meeting.
No, very brief meeting, and died shortly after that. So
a lot of people are going, "Oh, is there a connection?" I mean, there isn't, but
yeah, very exactly. It's significant that it was just a very brief meeting, and perhaps says something about what the. Although the Pope always stays out of politics, it may say what he thinks about the current American regime.
He had a cardinal, didn't he, before, because the Pope refused a proper state meeting with Vance. So he sent a cardinal to teach him about the Bible. Yeah. Apparently, he sat down with him and said, "Look, the Pope's not very happy about the way you're treating immigrants and the poor. That this is what's in the Bible and this is what isn't in the Bible." And so he got a lecture before he went in to briefly see the Pope.
Which could potentially damage Trump's base, because an awful lot of Catholics in the States, and understanding the importance of looking after those less fortunate than you is a key sort of teaching of Catholicism, and if the American administration isn't seen as living up to that, that's a big problem. So, and even Trump, although Trump is going to the funeral on Saturday, even the nature of his announcing that was all with a sort of excited exclamation mark, as though he was going to a big party.
To a big party. Well, the thing is that this Pope did not approve of Trump or Trumpism. Yeah. Francis did not, and apparently as well. I mean, I'm not Catholic. I'm not religious in any way. So I was looking into Pope Francis. And he seems to have been a genuinely holy man. He wasn't interested in the trappings. He didn't live in the Vatican Palace. He lived in a little house attached. He was very simple. He didn't wear the gold and the garb, and you can see that from his coffin, a very simple wooden coffin. And he wanted a very simple funeral. So this was a true man of God. This is a man who believed in, every single day he phoned a Catholic church in Palestine to talk to the Palestinian Catholics that were there, very small. But every day he rang them, FaceTimed them and chatted with them. I just hope that for the sake of Catholicism or even religion as a whole, that another good man like this becomes the next pontiff.
Yeah, you'd hope so, and there's a fair chance of that because of the sort of, I think, 130-odd voting cardinals. He will have chosen many of those.
Yeah.
So in theory, although not always the case in practice, they should be sort of cut from the same cloth as himself, because although he had a duty to, and he did do this, try and pick cardinals from underrepresented perhaps parts of the world.
Africa
exactly.
and Asia.
Yes, but you'd hope that broadly they were of his ilk, although depending on who you listen to, some people think he was progressive and others think he was some conservative, which is probably a victory in that way.
That is a victory,
that if people think he was both progressive and conservative, he's managed to sort of unite the church quite well.
Yeah, and I just like that the simplicity that he had, that he wasn't into the trappings of it. He wasn't, because I think that is definitely a criticism of Catholicism, is the extreme wealth that is held in the Vatican. And when you consider that they're supposed to be there to support the poor, the Vatican could do that if it sold everything it owned. Right?
Yes, and even in death he wants to be buried not in the Vatican, in a nearby church that he used to visit a lot. And as you say, even the phone calls he was making to Gaza, I think the last one he made on Saturday, day before he died. So incredible, working right up to the end. Died at 88, but literally working up to his dying
holy
breath.
Man.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of this is what you want to see from a religious leader, is somebody who actually leads with his heart and completely believed in the scripture. I mean, even though I don't, just to see a nice man behaving well towards the vulnerable in all societies, I think is an incredible thing. Another story, mourners in Bay Area appreciate his progressive stance. That's another story on the Pope. It's reached people throughout the world. And Earth Day puts focus on battles on horizon. Environmentalists and state leaders vow to fight rollbacks from Trump. God, there's going to be so many legal cases, aren't there? I mean, how many already?
Exactly, and there'll just be more and more. I mean, it is a sort of, I think it's a Californian-based paper, the Mercury News, so they're taking that sort of stance you'd expect from a sort of Democrat-leaning thing, that pointing out that on Earth Day, which is the 22nd, that Trump is rolling back all the changes that environmentalists sort of wanted and try and save the planet and mitigate the risk of climate change. But there's just going to be court battles all over the place. So.
Yeah, they're really, I mean, so many of them. Right at the top there, Hegseth again, Secretary of Defence, had another chat giving the secret classified information to his wife and his brother-in-law. I mean, Trump's backing him.
I think he'll continue to back him. That's again just revealing state secrets and defence secrets in a chat group. This time with family. Just thinks it's all a big joke, really, doesn't he? Really doesn't seem to take any of it seriously.
He doesn't take any of it seriously. No, he really doesn't.
And at some point there'll be a risk. There could potentially be American service personnel dying, and because he's not careful enough with defence secrets.
But I mean, he had a stupid name for it as well. I can't remember what it was now, but it was like he was deliberately doing it. It wasn't accidentally. He didn't accidentally send this stuff. It was all, this is what I'm doing in defence type thing. I mean, it was just. And his wife goes to meetings. She's a television producer.
Yeah.
And he takes her along to defence meetings.
I mean, you just couldn't.
You couldn't make it up, right?
No.
It's just like, what are you doing? And stocks plummet as Trump escalates the Fed attack because he thinks he can control the American Federal Reserve and tell them to lower interest rates.
Yeah, he's desperate for interest rates to be lower. I mean, the markets did bounce back a little bit from a terrible day, but they're still way down, 10% down on where they were. But Trump is desperately trying to force the Fed to cut interest rates because it will reduce the cost of American borrowing.
But he can't do that. That's not how it works.
Doesn't seem to take no for an answer, does he, on most things? And he is determined to either get the interest rates down or try and get the guy who's there as an independent, the same way we have over here. Bank of England should be independent and is independent of the government. But if it
Thanks
doesn't,
to Gordon Brown.
That's right. And if you don't do what Trump wants, then, as we've seen in lots of other cases, he tries to get you out of a job.
But this is what the markets are responding to, because this guy's term will run out at some point and they're worried that it will change and then Trump will be in charge of interest rates, which will be, as we've seen with tariffs, chaotic.
Yeah, and this is what we saw him do with the Supreme Court, and he's now trying to do it with financial institutions.
I mean, there's no stopping him, is there, at the moment? He's not even done 100 days yet.
And it's a crazy ride, isn't it?
It's not even 100 days yet. Extraordinary. Right, let's have a look at the Metro. And instant sack for bad cops. I'll believe that when I see it, to be fair. At last, police officers will be fired if they fail vetting, Home Secretary promises. So this is constant vetting, apparently, that is meant to happen throughout a police officer's career, I believe, although I can't really read it very clearly. But that rogue officers must be sacked immediately, because at the moment what happens is they go on administrative leave and they get full pay and full pension paid while they're being investigated for stuff that they know that they did. So
yeah, sometimes for years. And
yeah.
also, and even when it looks like they are going to get prosecuted successfully, they just resign ahead of any disciplinary action, so they get away with it from that point of view. And what police used to do, this has been tightened up on to some extent, is just move to a different force.
Yes.
And get away with it that way. So there is an attempt to tighten up on this, and it's about time too, and that you do see more cases of police, particularly for sexual misconduct, being prosecuted. But it can't come soon enough, because there's so many rotten apples in there at the moment. It's just not just one or two, that they do need dealing with.
Particularly in the Met, and apparently there are so many rotten apples in there at the moment that they actually, if they did sack them all, there'd be a crisis, a policing crisis. You just wouldn't, because you sack somebody who's, okay, a wrong 'un, but they're fairly senior, and you've got nobody coming through to replace them. So it's, but you've got to get rid of the bad ones.
Well, that's right. And the other problem is it's a recruitment issue, because people are looking at all these cases, and they're so mistrusted by large elements of the public. Who wants to be a policeman or policewoman at the moment? Not many people.
Not me, Gov.
Yeah.
Not me. Right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have a look at the Daily Express.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good to have your company, and with me is Vincent Moss, who's a former political editor, and we're going through Wednesday's newspapers and the Daily Express. So the Chancellor is on her way, or probably arrived by now, to the US, into Washington, DC, for a meeting there, not just not with Trump, but with a meeting. But Reeves cannot blame Trump for UK's growth mess. I suspect we can blame some of it on Trump, because the tariffs are definitely going to have an impact on growth here, but not according to the Express.
Yes, it's slightly strange, because I think the IMF, which is the basis for this story, and the chancellors out there, they're saying that it is largely not only are the tariffs going to hit the UK, but that they do the most damage to America, and their predictions are that growth in Britain will drop, and that inflation will rise. I think growth is predicted to drop by the economy would grow by about 1.1%, but much less than expected.
Yeah.
I think it was expected to be about 1.5%, and inflation will probably be about 3%. So pretty bad news, and it is largely the fault of, as everybody else is saying, Trump's tariffs. But yes, the Express is saying that Reeves cannot blame Trump for UK's growth mess. Well, it might not be entirely Donald Trump's fault, but the tariffs are a big part of it.
Huge part of that, and not just for what's happening in the US and here, but globally.
Yes.
It's unsettled absolutely everything. And of course it is going to have an impact, if not just on consumer confidence, which of course that has a knock-on effect onto pricing and into interest rates and all of those, and inflation. So
exactly, and the crazy thing is the worst hit is America. That's what the IMF is saying, is that it's all very well. Trump has always argued that tariffs will bring in loads of money, whatever it is, $7 trillion, and
he's making billions a day, hundreds of billions a day, apparently,
and bring in jobs, manufacturing jobs to America. Well, all this would be great if true, but one, it's going to take a very long time if it does work out, and two, in the meantime, the worst hit is America and American consumers.
Of course it is. I think the consumer confidence is the lowest since the 1930s or something like that. I was reading today. It's really, really bad. But I mean, also, you know, he's boasting about these tariffs that he's getting in. The Americans are paying them.
Yes.
I mean, this is the thing. I think he still thinks that is being paid for by the exporting country, not the importing country.
Exactly, and it all just gets added to the price of goods. So Americans will pay more, which means inflation, which means that their wages are worth less effectively, unless they get paid more than the rate of inflation. So yeah, it's problematic, and it's reflected in the confidence in the stock markets and everybody bailing out of stocks. Gold is now at a record price as people are looking for safe havens for their money because they just have no confidence. No
confidence in the dollar at all at the moment. But I was also reading today that Doge has, you know, they first of all said they were going to save $2 trillion. It turns out that it's a small percentage of about 100 billion. And some of that they can't qualify and classify, so it's about 90 billion. And already Donald Trump has spent 154 billion more than Joe Biden did at the same point in his presidency when he first started. So Donald's spending more, and this Doge savings are just not there.
No, exactly.
They're just not there.
They won't
because there wasn't the corruption that he was talking about.
They won't be, and the cost of servicing American debt is so high, which is again why he needs the interest rates to come down. That he'll continue to talk a winning game as he always does, but the figures don't lie, and unless he can turn things around and really boost the economy and see interest rates start to fall, he's going to have a problem. And there's all these other voices, especially those outside the US who are a bit more free to speak up, are saying, look, you know, these tariffs are damaging and they're damaging you the most. So hopefully there'll be a rethink at some point, because otherwise we're heading towards a global recession.
Yeah, and it's really very sad about America, because today again on Truth Social he was saying polling really high. I've never been higher. Nobody's ever been higher than I am. And actually the truth is that he's the lowest that any president has ever been, in terms of many of the polls now saying that he's underwater on a lot of things. But of course it doesn't matter, because the press there are now the head producer, I think, of CBS 60 Minutes. He's just resigned because he says, I don't have journalistic integrity or freedom anymore. So you've got great journalists like that leaving because they can't tell the truth anymore. So it doesn't matter how much he lies, because the truth isn't getting out anyway.
Yeah, although he says the opposite. He says that he gets an unsupportive media coverage, but he's so powerful and he's got such powerful supporters in the media, and particularly these days on social media, that he gets pretty good coverage really for what he does.
He definitely
and he
does.
effectively gets.
He's always on Fox News.
He's right. And he does these effectively daily news conferences, which get covered live on most of the networks. So he gets pretty much, whereas there might be broadcasting rules, especially during an election period, we're entering kind of local elections in the UK when there are tighter broadcasting rules, and around general elections in the UK, they're really tight rules on broadcasting. And that's not the same in the States.
No, it certainly isn't. Right, let's have a look at the FT for Wednesday. As you were just saying, anxiety drives gold to $3,500 per ounce. Is that right?
Yeah.
Crikey.
It's gone up and up and up because other safe havens that people would have gone to, whether it's bonds or other sort of potential commodities. Nobody's sure where's safe, and in a crisis people always turn to gold, and it's now reached these record levels, and all as the FT says in the wake of this Fed attack, the attack that Donald Trump has mounted on the Federal Reserve in his sort of quest to get interest rates cut.
It's yeah, oh, gosh, I wish I'd kept all the gold now.
I would have kept it if I'd had anything to start with.
Yeah. I've got a little bit, but it's not going to be worth. Mind you, it's pretty worth a bit more now.
I bet.
Putin's offer to halt war at current front line piles pressure on Ukraine. This is in the FT, interesting front page, because there are other papers that have covered this as well, saying that, I think it was the Telegraph that I saw briefly, Trump to let Putin keep seized land. I think that was always going to go that way, wasn't it?
Feels that way, but terrible for Ukraine, of course, because...
And rewards Russia again.
Exactly, for bad behaviour, extremely bad behaviour, but it looks as though the deal would be that they would keep the Crimea, which they took in 2014, they would keep the Donbass and the eastern region, and there wouldn't be very much in it for Ukraine at all, so not much of a deal there. I mean, it's hard to see in many ways how it could have been much different, and it would have been what people expected, but it's pretty rough on Ukraine, because I think apart from maybe some deal where they're allowed to buy weapons from the West, it's not a deal they get a huge amount out. But Trump is desperate to, or not desperate, but has made clear, as JD Vance, that if a deal isn't done soon, then America's very busy and got other things to do and will just walk away.
Because Trump's bored of it already, isn't he? He didn't manage to fix it in a day like he said he was going to.
Yeah.
So he's bored. The thing is, this is 20% of Ukraine.
Yes.
This isn't just a little bit of land. And I think Zelensky's playing quite clever with refusing to yield Crimea, because I think he's going to have to, and I think he knows that. But he's probably saying, I'm not even going to give you Crimea, so that the deal can be done, that this 20% of land is returned in exchange for Crimea. That's what I think.
He's got to try something, hasn't he? Because I think we all suspect that even if a deal is done and there is a ceasefire, that at some point Putin will just come back. It will just be a pause and give it a year or two.
Well, he's creeping ever forward, isn't he? I mean, it's outrageous, the idea that they would have to give up 20% of their land to a man who just took it, and then you're going, yeah, all right, you can have it. I mean, that's what happened with Crimea. Look what happened with Crimea, and he came back. Yes. Everybody went, we capitulated to Putin and went, all right, well, you've got it now. All right, you can have it. And he went, great, that's all I want. And then 5 years later, he was back and taking 20%. Oh, that's all I want now. I'm happy with that. 5 years later, where is he going to be then?
Exactly, that's the risk, isn't it? And if you imagine if it was this country or any other country, who else would put up with somebody coming in and seizing
20%?
Exactly.
Imagine that if they took 20% of England, or you know, just took Scotland off us, or whatever. You just go, no, I'm sorry, you
just
can't
took Kent and Sussex, and you know, but left us London. People would say, well, we wouldn't put up with that.
Yeah, no, of course we wouldn't put up with that. And I don't know why the world's going, Zelensky should just say yes to that. And it's like, no. I hope he plays a smarter game than that. The Daily Star, not funny this morning, sadly. So we'll just get this out of the way. Football fracas. Beeb bosses gave me the red card. Lineker was after 3 more years. I bet he was on Match of the Day. But Auntie wanted £1.35 million per year presenter to leave. Yes, Gary, because £1.35 million is too much.
It's an awful lot of money.
It's too much.
I think the salaries started in the days when there was a much more competitive market in the commercial sector, and there was a risk that top talent could be lured away to effectively ITV, but the market sort of collapsed, the money's not there, so but I think also what he says is that one of the main thrusts of this interview I think he did with Amal Rajan is that he thinks that he was okay to speak out on political issues as he did because he was a freelance, and he thinks that being freelance is different from being on the staff. But I think many people seeing the BBC and watching him every weekend wouldn't have seen that nuance. Now there is a technical difference.
But there isn't really, because when you're providing your services to an organisation, And that's what a freelance does, right? You provide your services to an organisation. You can bring them into disrepute. You can be fired for that. You can have your contract taken away from you immediately. So you are working for that organisation, even if it's only 1 day a week. You do owe the same as a staff member. And if you look at the contracts that you get, it's just, he's wrong in this
Exactly,
instance.
and I think from a viewer point of view, you're looking at the BBC,
Yeah.
you're watching the BBC or
Yeah.
ITV or any other station, and you assume the people you are watching on it, especially the presenters, are speaking or acting for the BBC.
And he would, contractually, he would have been, because anything that he did on the BBC didn't belong to him. It's like everything I do here. It says every word I utter belongs to News UK. Every word. I don't own anything. I don't own a part of it. I can't reissue this broadcast anywhere.
And he would have known that the perception, at least, even if his contract might have been slightly different, that people assumed he was talking for the BBC. So when he did intervene on issues of migration or Middle East or something like that, people felt that he was talking to the BBC, and he thought that was different, and a lot of it was done on social media, wasn't done when he was on the BBC. But the perception is that he's a BBC employee, even though he technically probably hasn't been for a long time. He's been freelance.
He ain't going to get that money anywhere else. So
no, although he's very successful with his podcast business, so he's probably doing
good.
quite
I'm
a lot,
sure
making quite a lot of money.
I'm not gonna start a GoFundMe page for Gary Lineker, and I think that the BBC can get better value for money from 1.35 million than to pay one man that money.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think. Let's take a break. Back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk. It's Petrie with you, and with me is Vincent Moss. We're going through Wednesday's newspapers, and the Daily Telegraph shows the picture of the Pope there lying in the chapel. He's been moved, I think, since then, hasn't he? Because he's going to lie in state. I think people are allowed to go and see him, aren't they?
Yes, they are at the moment. I think he's being moved ahead of the funeral on Saturday, isn't he?
Yeah. So, very simple casket as he demanded, and the guard there, the very famous guards standing behind his coffin, and cardinals around him praying. In death, they say, as in life, the Pope favours simplicity, and they're talking about the fact that he will be transported to St. Peter's Basilica to lie in state, so that the crowds can go past him. So he's going to St. Peter's Basilica. The other story, Trump to let Putin keep seized land. We talked about that. Starmer's shameless trans law about turn. Sir Keir Starmer has been accused of publishing a shameless work of fiction after the government claimed it had always supported single-sex spaces. This is really interesting to me because this court that literally just looked at biological scientific fact claimed that, you know, a woman is a biologically born woman and a man is a biologically born man. And the judge even said Look, this is just a biological fact of the situation. What society does with that, and what the world does, what government and society does with this, is up to them. I'm not making a deliberation about trans women or trans men. I'm not saying that. And he went to great pains to say that, and yet this has been blown up. And I was absolutely horrified to see that the pro-trans rallies that happened were defacing monuments to suffragettes who have fought for women's rights. So if they feel that they are actual women, why are they fighting against women's rights? Defacing a suffragette statue. That to me just went, it said so much to me that I won't repeat because I'll probably be cancelled for it. But I just thought that's disgusting.
Exactly, I'm sure a lot of people were offended by that because there's all sorts of horrible graffiti put on the statues, and also I think there were death threats on some of the banners and posters as well.
About hanging turf, so hanging women that wanted to.
And the criticism again of J.K. Rowling and others who've been supporters of safe spaces for women and girls. So the backlash does continue in terms of that Supreme Court ruling. But finally, we have seen the government and sort of Keir Starmer come out and say that, as we probably would have expected, that they accept the ruling, which is being portrayed as a U-turn because of the comments that Keir Starmer and others have made.
It's so interesting to me that this is not. This is just a scientific evidential fact. It's not, it doesn't say how we should treat trans women. And I think that trans women should be treated with love and support. And trans men. I genuinely do. But nobody was saying that. The judge made great pains to say, this is not what I'm saying. I have just ruled on a scientific fact, not on how society treats people who are trans. That's up to you. That's up to society.
And that's where
now.
It does go next, because what happens to the existing spaces, how they looked after, what happens in particular in the NHS in terms of mixed wards and those sort of things that still exist. So there are areas where there's work to be done, and it's still not clear what the government is going to do in terms of public bodies and tell them about spaces. So that's where I think in particular Kemi Badenoch and the Conservatives are putting the pressure on and saying to the government, well, what are you doing about these areas? And of course the government does point out that 14 years of Conservatives and there was precious little action dealing with these issues then. And there was an element of no politicians really wanted to seize this issue because they knew how difficult it was, and they've had to wait really for this ruling because nobody's wanted to come out, or the majority of politicians have wanted to come out and say something because they realised it's an area fraught with problems, and everybody agrees trans people should be treated with dignity and respect.
Absolutely. It's just how, I mean, and maybe this will focus people now into achieving that rather than this fighting. But I was absolutely disgusted with these trans women who were attacking statues that were placed there in gratitude for the fight that those women made for all women. And if they consider themselves as all women, I'm shocked that they would attack the freedoms that those suffragettes and the rights that those suffragettes brought us. It's hypocritical.
It is,
and it makes no sense.
Yeah, and some of them are saying that they don't feel that there's enough in common where they could even have a conversation and talk about ways forward and resolving these things, because they're so far apart. The most sort of people with the most entrenched positions are so far apart.
But this wasn't a transphobic decision. This was just a clarity of scientific fact.
Exactly, but the trans community feels shortchanged because apparently no trans people were consulted in the way the judgment was reached.
But it was reached based on biology.
Yes.
Not on societal or any other basis. It's just that, chromosomes XY, that was what it was based on.
Yeah. But it's an issue. But it hasn't resolved the issue, has it? That's the problem.
No.
It's in many ways seen as a common sense judgment because it's stating, as you say, medical, biological fact, as many people would see it, that only a man can be a man, only a woman can be a woman. But that even saying that in itself can be very controversial.
But just in terms of biology, I mean, if you want, if somebody believes themselves to be a woman in their mind, and they want to, have the surgery and things like that, that's brilliant. Good for them. I'm absolutely 100% supportive of that. I don't even mind them being in women's spaces. I don't have an issue with that, because most trans women and most trans men just want to live a normal life. They just want to have a quiet life. They just want to have a normal life like you and I've got. They don't want all this fuss and bluster. But they are not. They haven't lived a woman's life. They don't know what the difference is. It's like me declaring myself to be a black woman because I identify as black, and there are white people who do that. I've never lived a day in a black woman's shoes. I don't know about the glances or the looks or the fear or the disrespect or all the other things that go along with being a black woman, even in this world today, which is disgusting. But you haven't had to walk in my shoes. You don't know the fear I feel when I'm filling up my car at a petrol station late at night and there's nobody around and there's somebody walking across the forecourt. It's things like that the lived experience of being that makes you that person, in my view.
Very much so, and the great tragedy of all this at the moment is it's such a toxic debate.
I know,
at the
and
moment
it shouldn't be.
That it's
because I just want to move to the next stage where we're accepting of trans people and they feel loved and supported, and we need to get to that stage, because we can't do it right now. The Daily Mail for Wednesday also talks about the Kemi Badenoch saying PM owes apology to so many women. No, he doesn't. Why? Starmer finally admits trans women aren't women. Biologically speaking, they are not. But in every other way, they believe they are, which is fine. Absolutely. I don't have a problem with that. And Starmer finally admits that. Tory leader tears into Labour in electrifying debate. I don't think he owes an apology. I think he was worried and confused and I don't want an apology, Keir. You're fine. For taking away the winter fuel allowance, yes, I do want an apology for that. And all the other stuff you've done, but not that. Don't care. Right, the Eye is saying dash for cash ISAs. Savers scramble to lock in the best rates before reforms hit. I just got a message from my bank today saying we're changing your savings rate lower. Which is fine because I haven't really got any savings, so it's fine. It'll make about a penny's difference to me a year with the savings I've got. But yeah, of course that's what's going to happen.
Yes, I mean, there's been a lot of speculation that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, would cut the current amount you're allowed to put into an ISA, which I think is about £20,000 a year, potentially as low as £4,000 a year. Well, many people may think that that's a nice problem to have about where you put your savings. But we expect the Bank of England early next month to probably cut interest rates again, so saving rates will go down. Good for people who've got mortgages, but bad for people who've got savings. And the Eye's highlighting this. People are trying to sort of get in on some of the sort of best rates. Some of them are around, talking about the average 1 year fixed rate ISA rises to 4.12%, which is not a bad rate, but that will probably fall next month. But if you are going to be limited in how much you can put aside potentially the next time Rachel Reeves makes a financial statement, probably in the autumn, then it does make sense to pile some money into an ISA now if you've got that cash to spare, and if you think that the Chancellor's going to change the rules.
Yeah, which I think she probably is, isn't she? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, 4.12 seems terribly low as well, doesn't it?
It's not great, but I think the thinking behind changing the rules is that it's all very well having this money in ISAs, but the Chancellor wants that money invested in British businesses and stocks and shares and small companies, and she thinks by changing the rules, potentially, if that's what she is going to do, that will see more savers' money funneled into investing in British businesses.
I don't think it will.
But we're not a nation in the same way Americans are, potentially, of
they
investing
love that,
in
but
stocks
we
and shares.
don't do that.
No, we don't.
We don't take the risk. Right, let's have a quick break. Back in a sec.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you, with me, Vincent Moss, former political editor. And we're going through Wednesday's newspapers. The Guardian, again, that story saying the IMF blames Trump tariffs for major negative shock to the world economy. And even though he sort of backed down on very quickly, on the larger of the tariffs, there's still a 10% across the board. And he's talking now about tariffs on pharmaceuticals, which he hasn't declared those yet, but when he does, that is going to see a major drop in the markets, in everything. That's going to be devastating.
Very much so, and will increase the cost of medicines, which is the last thing that anybody wants.
Particularly in the US.
Yeah, and you know, medicines that are manufactured overseas, tariffs on those, and healthcare costs are already spiralling in America anyway. So a bad thing, and the IMF are talking about global GDP growth being 2.8% this year, which is 0.5% weaker than it was expecting. So again, it's these tariffs are just hitting the whole world in a, as you say, a major negative shock. And Trump just doubles down on it by looking at extending tariffs rather than sort of rowing back on them. So pretty bad news, and bad news not just for America but for everybody else, us included.
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely shocking. And another thing, we're talking earlier about bringing, you know, Trump's idea is to bring manufacturing back to the US. The time has moved on. I don't believe that's going to happen, and I don't believe that there's any value in that. If you speak to any CEOs in the United States of America and ask them why they put their car factory, parts factory in Canada, one of the main reasons is because the Canadian government pays for healthcare. And in America, they have to pay part of the healthcare. And when you consider that there was a guy I was listening to today who said that his healthcare is $2,000 a month. Imagine a month you have to come up with that money for healthcare, and he's probably getting money from his employer as well towards his healthcare. So that's billions of dollars across. If you were bringing manufacturing back, all of those factories, all of those workers, if they had healthcare attached to their wages, which most do, CEOs don't want to pay that. That hits their profit. They don't want to pay that. They also don't want to pay minimum wage. They want to pay less than minimum wage, which is why they have factories in China, or they use Chinese people. You know? Exactly. That's the whole reason why all these factories left America and Europe in the first place, is because of the cheaper costs of labour. And the first thing most Americans ask when they're starting a new job, my pals over there, is they ask about the healthcare package. What the healthcare package is. Because they haven't got an NHS, they rely on healthcare, and their employer provided healthcare. So it's more important than salary. You will ask about the healthcare package. Does it extend to your family and all the rest of it? So it's all very well willingly. They don't want to pay that extra money. No, they don't. So, and also the other thing about factories is, if you ask Americans would they like more factories in America, the answer is usually yes. But if you then poll them and ask them would they like to work in a factory, the answer is usually no. Yeah. So it's all very well willing these things back, but your average American doesn't hanker after working in a factory. So even if they came back, unlikely in many respects, Americans don't necessarily want to work in a factory anymore. No, I know. And also, if you're talking about pharmaceutical factories, that'll take over a decade to build, to the spec that you need to produce drugs, and then you've got to have the skill, which isn't there, and you've got a very low unemployment rate in America. So where are these people going to come from to man these factories? Well, they've just lowered the legal age of working to 14, haven't they now? Well, kids at 14. That might be where his labour force comes from. Yeah, maybe. So yeah, and it's all very well them going, well, there's child labour in China. Yeah, well, there'll be child labour in America soon, so don't be having a go at China over that. Right, so a UK to host Ukraine talks amid Moscow speculation. David Lammy, God help us, will host US and European negotiations for fresh talks about Ukraine. There you go. Let's wait and see what happens there. Yep. The Times for Wednesday. SAS veterans being unjustly hounded over Troubles service. Hundreds of Special Forces veterans are being unjustly hounded over incidents that occurred decades ago in Northern Ireland, according to serving and former elite troops. I mean, why would anybody want to join the armed forces if you're going to be hounded years and years later?
Well, that's right. The government's repealing the Northern Ireland Troubles Act 2023, which brought an end to inquests and civil cases. And, of course, this has now worried an awful lot of former service personnel, including SAS veterans, that they could be hauled before the courts for things that happened many, many years ago, and they thought that there wouldn't be any further action on.
Imagine the stress of that.
Yeah, and many of them will be very old now.
Yeah, they will. The other story, slave labour setback to Miliband's green goals. I was talking about this last week and saying, I don't know how he's going to get away with that. These are solar panels linked to Chinese slave labour that Miliband, I believe, was due to buy, and knew that they were a bit dodge, but they were cheap. And now they're being told that he's now being told he can't have them, I think.
Yes, he's saying that, the Times is saying that in a significant policy reversal, Ed Miliband will introduce an amendment to legislation that will force GP Energy, the new company, to ensure that slavery and human trafficking is not taking place in the supply chain. So if there's a suspicion that there is slavery in the making of some of these solar panels, that they can't be included in green energy that we use over here. And the government is saying that they don't think this will be a problem in terms of supply, because there's an absolute abundance of solar panels, and it's more than possible to source our global need in a way that's compliant with human rights.
Well, yeah, this is because they've tracked solar panels, wind turbines and batteries must not contain material suspected to have been produced through slave labour. Much of the world's supply of polysilicon comes from the Xinjiang region, where there are suspected human rights abuses of the Uyghur population, the Uyghur Muslim population, that have taken to re-education camps in China, but there is belief they're being used in the supply chain to work on these things.
Although, if you're going to go right down to the supply chain and how products are made, very difficult to ensure that every single
it's almost
component,
impossible, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you look at some of the components, the minerals coming from African states, or where they've got children digging up these things as well. So very, very difficult, but it should be. The Chinese are saying that there is an absolute abundance of solar panels. Sources said Chinese were beginning to understand how important and serious this is for countries buying materials from them. So the Chinese, I hope, really, they don't need slave labour. They've got a labour force in China. They don't need to be hounding these Uyghur Muslims. The Sun newspaper, it's a kind of tragic. This is Freddie Mercury. Furious sister secretly spent $3 million to snap up the Queen singer's memorabilia after it was put up for auction by his ex. Kashmir Bulsara, 73 years old, bought items including a Wurlitzer jukebox and a waistcoat worn by Freddie in a music video because she believed they should stay in the family. I don't know what she's got to be furious about. I mean, if they belonged to the ex and he sold them and she bought them, I'm a bit confused as to why that's a problem.
Well, I remember because it was a treasure trove of memorabilia. I remember the auction when it was publicised at Sotheby's. There were an awful lot of real bits of rock and roll history there. But I guess often when people die, especially when they're famous and there's a will, there's a dispute, and she may have felt that she wanted those things kept in the family, and the only way to get them back was to buy them at auction. And it's only just emerged now that she's done that. It's an awful lot of money to spend, £3 million buying memorabilia, but she's got the money and she wants it in the family.
I don't see why that's the ex's fault. He gave it to his ex, Mary.
Yeah.
So she, it was hers to sell.
Exactly.
She sold it. The sister bought it. I don't know.
I think it's fine. It does sort of reveal a bit of a family rift, though, doesn't it? Or certainly a rift of some.
I'm confused. If it belongs to you and you sell it, then that's fine.
I think, yep, it is fine. Yes.
It's not really that deep.
No.
And like you said, if she had the 3 million to buy it, then it must be, you know, it'll be worth that, won't it?
Yes.
So you can sell it again. Right. The final newspaper, the Daily Mirror, as wills to attend. That's a horrible line. As wills to attend funeral. Basically, it's Prince William is going to be going to the Pope's funeral in the stead of the King. But that's a horrible headline. It doesn't make any sense to me. As wills to attend. Peaceful Pope Francis lies in state, and we know that Prince William will attend the service. So there you go. That's it, Vincent Moss. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
And I will see you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, coming up, we're going to be talking about autism, what it's like to live with autism. If you work with people who've got autism, if you live with somebody who has autism, what do you make of what RFK Jr. said in the United States of America about people with autism, that they'll never write a poem, which is oddly specific, never pay taxes, never have a job, never go on a date, and will never be able to use the toilet by themselves. That is not a description of autism that I think is fair or representative, although it may represent a small number. But still, it's not something that we should be turning the clock back on and saying, oh, this is a disease, you might be able to catch it. So I want to hear from you. What's it like to live with autism, live with somebody who has autism? Let me know. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning to you. It is now Wednesday, and what I want to talk to you about is something that was said by the Health Secretary of the United States of America, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And he basically was incredibly, I think, blinkered, misinformed, confused, uninformed, I don't know. I mean, I listened to this and I was horrified that this description was being applied to so many people on such a broad, wide spectrum as autism. So I want you to listen to it because you may have heard it. I mean, I was so shocked. I thought, I'm definitely doing that as a phone-in. So here is the Health Secretary of the United States of America, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Sir, this is an individual tragedy as well. Autism destroys families. More importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are our children. These are children who should not be suffering like this. These are kids who, many of them were fully functional and regressed because of some environmental exposure into autism when they're 2 years old. And these are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. And we have to recognize we are doing this to our children.
I mean, unbelievable. And also just completely wrong in so many ways. He's pigeonholed so many people into being this sort of lost, useless thing. They can't do anything. They're just rubbish, nothing. They'll never achieve anything, which we know is wrong. And to suggest that children up to the age of 2 had been fully functional and then regressed into some autism, there's no evidence to support that whatsoever. The reason that people may believe that to be the case is up until the age of 2, children don't do very much. At around about the age of 1.5, 2 years old, you then start to see the features of development. They then start to socialise or are awkward socialising. They then start to walk or can't walk very well. They then start to show things like empathy and understanding, or don't because they have autism. It is simply because that's the age at which you can spot these developmental markers. Anyone with a toddler knows where their child should be at a certain stage. But you don't really see that until they're a little bit older. So the suggestion that they were fully functional. And also, by the way, if you're listening on the radio, that was supposedly a human being talking there. I mean, you'd think that he, of all people, would be more understanding of neurodivergence. That's what I'm going to say. I am absolutely blown away that he was able to say this and there are barely any voices standing up against him. Because in the United States of America right now, you can't for fear of losing your job. He says he's going to find out what causes autism by September this year. Decades of research, science, actual science. He referred to it as a disease. You don't catch autism. He was also one of the voices that linked vaccines to autism, which has been so debunked, it's not even funny anymore how much that has been debunked. That Andrew Wakefield's study was faked because he was in the pockets of Big Pharma who wanted to sell individual vaccines. That is known as a fact. He lied about his research. It's not true. And it was I think it was about 30 kids. And he came up with the whole link between MMR and autism. 800 studies have been done on Wakefield's evidence, if you like, on his research. 800. Looking to prove him right, and not one of them could do it. Not one of them was able to prove him right. So now this Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who historically has had a problem with heroin, says he's going to figure it out by September. Decades of studies not being able to figure it out. But they believe it's genetic. It's not a disease that you catch. You don't catch autism. And also the idea that you can, if it's a disease, that you can somehow find a cure for it. I don't know. I found it so shocking, so shocking that somebody with such a high position, in such power, can have such a narrow, negative view of millions of people who are on a spectrum, who are differently thinking, who may need a bit of support. There are those, of course, who are at the very top end of the autistic spectrum who probably do need all the support that we could possibly give them. But it doesn't mean that they're ill. It doesn't mean that they're worthless. None of that applies. Any more than somebody who was born with spina bifida or something else. They're physically disabled. It doesn't mean that they're hopeless, they're useless, they're rubbish. This kind of narrative, I think, is harmful. I think it's really harmful. That othering of people. It's a disease, we can get rid of it. It's like saying being gay is a disease, or we can cure gayness. And believe me, there's plenty of people who think that as well. Idiots. So give me a call. I'd love to know about you, perhaps living with autism. Can you manage to go to the toilet on your own? Well, that was the other thing he said, wasn't it, as well? I know plenty of autistic people who've never asked me to help wipe the bottoms. So I just found it offensive. I was offended on behalf of everybody, the people that I know who are on the spectrum of autism. I was offended for them. Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. You can also send me a message, put the word talk up front, then your message to 87222. Let's go to Mandy, first of all, in Denbighshire. Hello, Mandy.
Hi.
Hi. So what did you make of what RFK Jr. said?
He's ill-informed, really, isn't he?
Yeah.
Uneducated, definitely.
Yeah.
And maybe he needs to be educated a bit better. I just don't understand his thinking whatsoever.
No. What's your experience of autism?
My daughter, the third child, had difficulties. I had the last two children, there were 10 months between them. And I knew she was different. I knew there was something different about her in what she did, how she behaved. And it wasn't until she was 9 that I decided to go and get her diagnosed. And the only reason I done that was because she was going into high school and I couldn't intervene as I did in primary school. Well, it was primary school, I could go in and speak to a teacher and things like that. So that was the only reason that I was persuaded to...
That makes perfect sense.
Thinking she'd get help, which she didn't. But she went on to college for 3 years. Decided she wanted to do nursing. It took her in all 10 years to get to doing what she's doing. And she's a emergency department nurse.
Wow.
Absolutely loving it. She's a perfectionist.
Which is part of the autism, isn't it?
It is. Everything's got to be routine, perfectionist. And I know I was worried that things will, suddenly happen. And you've got to rush. But she knows the procedure for everything.
That's amazing.
So in every department, she knows. I mean, when she was doing her training, she absolutely loved being in theatre. And the surgeons used to teach her everything about what they were doing. So they were amputating legs, or they were... Wow. She was fascinated with all of this. And I thought maybe at some point she might even become a surgeon herself. Who knows? She's 28. She's settled down with her boyfriend now. And it all came together sort of this year where they got their own home, which they bought. It was a show home, so all the furniture that she'd been viewing this house was all there.
Oh, how nice.
Because she wouldn't be able to go and pick things out. She wouldn't know how things would look. She can't preempt how to sort things. So with it all being done for it was brilliant. And she's pregnant with her first child, which is due at the end of July. And I'm so proud of her.
Oh my God, you must be.
The difficulties that she's come through to get to where she is. It's just really, you've got to hone in what is it that they are. There's always good in every child, but there's something special that they are drawn to. And you've got to draw that out in them. And the difficulties that I went through as a mother with her, in the sense of having to, just the thing of having a trampoline in the garden, make sure you've got a trampoline, go and jump it out.
Oh, that energy, that
energy, that frustration. Because I used to hold the frustrations in, because she'd come out of school, and then I'd get a barrage of what she didn't understand.
So what was her, was she one of those that couldn't read a situation? So
Yeah,
she couldn't read what
no.
other people's perspective of a situation?
No, she wouldn't understand any of that. She couldn't, like, she didn't make friends. People came to her. She was that type of child because she was quiet.
Right.
She's good looking. And she just attracted people to her, so she didn't have to make friends. They come and befriend her. And with it being a girl as well, they do take on other people's... They mimic other people more so than I think lads do. But she was very much... I mean, just think she's so funny with it as well, because, I mean, she's 15. You can imagine this. She's 15. She sat in front of the television. The news is on. And something was going on in Jerusalem at this time. And she turned with shock on her face and said to me, "Mum, did you know there was an actual place called Jerusalem?" I said, "Well, of course it's an actual place. I thought it was just a story in that book."
Oh, bless her.
AKA the Bible.
Yeah.
I'm like, but so funny because she just comes out with things. But that's her way of thinking.
Yeah, and then she's found the job that suits her neurodiversity.
Exactly. Yeah,
you know, that she can be ultra focused.
Yeah, I didn't think that she would go into something like that. I mean, we had a cat. We had a few cats, and the cat was choking. And she says, "Hang on, hold it," goes running off because she'd been given information on first aid. And she went up to look what you do when somebody's choking. And I said, "By the time you've read that, the cat will have died." And it was just so funny. She thinks everything stops in place. If she says, "Hold it, don't move, stay there," she thinks that's it. Everything stops until she comes back in the room and says what you've got to do. Well, that's not how life. I've had to teach her from an early age all the different sayings that you have, you know, because I used to say to her, if she hurts herself, I'd say, "Oh, don't worry about it, give it a kiss." I'd say, "It'll be a pig's foot in the morning." Not realise that she was so worried.
And taking it literally.
And wouldn't sleep. Yeah, she wouldn't sleep because she thought she was going to end up with a pig's foot. So I used to teach her all the sayings then, like, you know, toast the bride. The bride doesn't actually get toasted.
Right, yeah.
You know, because things were taken literally. So I've had to teach her more so about how life is as you get older. And I'm still doing it now, even though she's 28. She's a nurse, but she still needs guidance.
Yeah.
On a lot of things. And I say it was a worrying time through uni because I thought, oh, you know, she was in Bangor. I was here in the other half. You know, it takes like an hour to get to where she is. And she'd be on the phone. I'd have the map in front of me while she's telling me where she had to go because of what was it. And I'd have to direct her because she wouldn't like to just walk in a place either. She'd have to wait for other people to be going in.
Her.
And it was...
Gosh, she's really worked hard then, hasn't she? Both of you have to overcome.
And people, as say, take advantage when it comes to... I'm worried about the sexual advantage as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because that did happen, even though she didn't understand. She wouldn't like to say no to people with anything. And it just wasn't in her vocabulary to be able to say no. Because she didn't like to upset people or worry people. But we've gotten through all that. We've gone through a lot of challenges.
She must have had to be very patient. I mean, a great mum.
Yeah. Well, a doctor actually said to me when she was diagnosed, the psychologist, she said to me, she said, if you hadn't have done what you've done for your daughter, she wouldn't have had a life. And this is what people need to learn, is there is a life for all children. And those with autism, it's just teaching them.
It's just different, right?
Things.
It's just a different way of thinking.
The brain just is wired up differently. That's all it is.
Yeah.
The brain is wired up. And I've noticed as well, a stupid thing, but with my daughter, she's, you know, normally your right side of your body is bigger than your left.
Yeah.
Naturally, but within her, it's her left side of her body is bigger than her right. So her left side, it's.
So that's probably the same with the brain.
She's a full shoe size difference in her feet.
Oh wow!
But she will only wear the smaller size because everything has to be tight on her.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I believe that everybody with autism will have their own. I mean, like the rest of us are supposed to fit into a box, right? If you're non-neurodivergent or neuronormative, I think it's called, which I don't believe anybody is, frankly. But because I think we're all so different. But there is a way of the way that we're supposed to think and supposed to do things. And somebody who's neurodivergent, each person who's neurodivergent will have a different way of thinking.
Yes.
And a different way of needing to be helped. It's absolutely fascinating. And it's not surprising she's a nurse because, like you said, once she's got those down, once she knows what she's got to do, she's going to be hyper-focused and brilliant.
Very, very much. And everybody comments how much of a brilliant nurse she is.
Oh, wonderful. Listen, you're a great mum, Mandy. What a fantastic call to kick off the conversation. Thank you. That is amazing. And you should be proud of her and yourself. I've got to take a quick break, but I will be back.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is
Hello there, and a very good morning to you. It is Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. And we're talking now about RFK Jr., who's the Health Secretary of the USA, description of those people with autism. And he seems to have only concentrated on those who are at the very, very far end of a very, very long spectrum. And he's also describing autism as a preventable disease, which no scientist has, I think, ever said it's a disease. You don't catch autism. But he has said some terrible things, I think. Autism, he said, destroys families. Today's autistic children will never pay taxes, they'll never hold a job, they'll never play baseball, they'll never write a poem, which I still think is odd, and they'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. Now, it doesn't describe a lot of the people I know who are on the spectrum of autism. And I just think it's really dangerous to lump everybody. And I understand there will be people for whom that is a possible lived reality. I get that. But it doesn't make them worthless. The sound of that is like, that's all they are. Oh, I never even go to the toilet on their own. It's just, to me, it's a really dangerous narrative to say that about a particular group of people and to just throw them away. It felt like he was just throwing those people away, that they were nothing and they were curable, which I find distasteful in the extreme. And I was truly shocked, actually, when I heard him, of all people, deliver comment on neurodiversity. Extraordinary. Linda is in London. Good morning, Linda. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you. But I'm angry, actually, but I'm okay.
Yeah, with RFK, not me.
Not you. No, you're all right.
I'm all right.
But, yeah, I'm autistic. I'm an autistic adult, and I just find the man can't even speak coherently. Is he being serious right about now? He sounded half asleep, and I just think that there's enough stigma as it is, but also I'm in quite a few autism groups on Facebook. A lot of them are kind of people from mainly the UK, Australia and the States. And I'll tell you what, those in the States, they are terrified. They're really scared, Petrie. So whilst I'm angry by what he said, I feel because people are frightened. They're frightened that they're going to lose their jobs. They're frightened that they're going to lose their benefits. They're frightened that they're going to be put in institutions.
I mean, that's the sort of thing that worries me with this narrative, right? This, lumping all people with autism together to this useless thing. And even if they are at that far end of the spectrum, it doesn't mean they're useless or unloved or not having a joyful life, right? That doesn't mean that at all. But he seems to think that it was just so, I don't know, just so horrible, I thought.
It's just vile, and it's all to do with, I believe, a narrative of his anti-vax thing. That's what I believe. That's where this has come from. But I see it quite a lot whenever there's a story about, people with autism on social media or anything like that. You will get people say, well, back in my day, we didn't have autism. Yes, you did.
Yes, you did. It just wasn't diagnosed.
They were the class clowns, Petrie. They were the kids that were considered the class clowns, or the shy one, or the aggressive one. They were the ones that then ended up, having to live a whole life without any support, and particularly being a woman. So sometimes I can present in a way you wouldn't necessarily know, but I mask. I've actually stopped masking so much. I don't mask as much now, but that's mainly because of my husband. And do you know what, though? This is where comments like his really are impactful, because I didn't go on my first date till I was 35. I then met my husband and we're now married. But that was because my whole life I'd been told I'd never be able to hold down a relationship. So I believed it. I believed it, Petrie.
And
I mean, a very happy marriage.
That is the impact, isn't it, of statements like this? And I was talking to a psychologist earlier on in the programme and was saying, you know, what about if you've got a child 2 or 3 years old who's just been diagnosed, and you hear that, and you think that is going to be your child's life? I mean, that is harmful.
The thing is, Petrie, I mean, I've spoken to you quite a lot over the years. I've got opinions on everything, okay? I am, you know, I'm an independent thinker. You know, I sometimes think of things that other people don't necessarily think of. Sometimes that can be problematic. Sometimes that can be quite useful.
Yeah.
I don't want to be cured. Keep your cure. But yes, do I wish that sometimes I didn't, because I do struggle. I mean, you know, ask my husband what happens if he accidentally puts something on the wrong plate. It's not. Really? It doesn't go. Oh my goodness, the wrong plate. I mean, one of our first big arguments is because he put ice cream in the wrong bowl. Honestly, I struggle. Shopping. So this is going to sound ridiculous, but the first lady you spoke to and said about her daughter was the show home. And I was like, oh, what a brilliant idea. Why didn't I think of that? Because, oh my gosh, I go into a shop and even if I know what I need, I'm overwhelmed. Instantly overwhelmed. I'm not good with choice. And menus is another one. So I've been known to phone my husband when I've been out without him, and he knows why I'm phoning him if I'm in a restaurant with friends or my sister, because I'm overwhelmed by the menu. So what he tends to do is kind of help me to pick out a couple of things to then choose from. I do feel overwhelmed most of the time. I do struggle. Sleep is a really big issue for me, particularly, which has been attributed to the autism. But I would like the world to be more accessible for people like me, but I don't want to be cured. I've got nothing to be cured from. I said to my husband, you know, when they were talking about it's like a disease, I was like, oh, don't get too close, you might catch autism. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's what you know, how can he call it a disease? I mean, that is such a horrible word anyway, but the idea that you should cure somebody of neurodivergence is, I mean, we would have lost artists and brilliant computer experts and mathematicians and, you know, all of these brilliant people.
Musk. I mean, we try not to claim him, but
we try not to claim him, no.
We try not to claim him, but Elon Musk, you know, very clearly on the spectrum, quite high.
Very clearly.
Absolutely. But yes, and this is another thing that upsets me as well, when recently there's been a couple of high-profile cases in the news where the perpetrators have been diagnosed with autism. And there's been two different sides. So some people think that, you know, oh, because they're autistic, they're more likely to be violent. Absolutely not. No, I don't believe that's the case. I think if you have autism, for example, I am quite quick to anger. That is probably partly because of my autism, usually because it's the anxiety manifesting itself. Right. So normally the anger is the secondary emotion, fear is the first. So yes, there is that element, but it's not an excuse, but B, it doesn't mean we're any more likely to be violent or commit a crime than the rest of the population. And I just think, sorry, I'm going off on one again. I'm kind of, my head, I've got like about 6 different things in my head, and I'm kind of confusing them. So in my head, it makes sense, but I don't know if it makes sense to anyone.
Sense. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
That's another thing I do. I go down a rabbit hole. I say I've talked to you enough. I think you know that I do this. But I start on one thing and end up somewhere completely different, which can sort of confuse people. And another thing is, autistic people, we tend to ask a lot of questions. And neurotypical people tend to see that generally as a challenge. I'm not challenging you. I'm asking you a question because I'd like to know why. It doesn't mean I'm being disobedient or I'm challenging your authority in any way. I would just like to know why I've been asked to do this.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. It's almost like how I would love to be without a filter. That, you know, but there's neurotypical. I don't even believe there is such a thing, to be honest with you.
No, I don't. But it's just. I think it can be quite helpful sometimes when you're kind of describing different groups of people.
Yeah, I get that. I do get that. But yeah, I mean, look, I think my brain works in a very odd way. My son's always saying I'm on some sort of spectrum or other because I'm a thinker all the time, and I love to ask questions as well. But sometimes I wish I didn't have a filter. I couldn't do this job if I didn't have a filter.
No, and I've learned not to filter so much, Petrie. I try never to deliberately offend, but I think that actually that the world would be a bit better if we didn't all walk on tiptoes.
I agree with that,
100%.
I totally agree with it, 100%.
If you ask me if your bum looks big in it, I'm going to tell you if your bum looks big in it, but I'm not being offensive. But you've asked me a question, I'm going to answer it.
Yeah, quite. Perfect. So that is brilliant to me. That's what you want from somebody, isn't it, really? That honesty, I think.
Yeah, but then I would come up with about 100 different suggestions of outfits that you could wear that would make you look fabulous.
Oh, well, I need you in my life. I'm telling you that, Linda. Thank you. Great to talk to you. I've got to take a very quick break because I'm late, but I will be back in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good morning. This is Talk and it's Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. Quickly moving on, I've got so many messages that I'd like to read out as well. This is from David. He said he, RFK Jr, sounded like he cared about what he was talking about, but he was so wrong. I have autistic family members. I've suspected I might be autistic myself. I've always felt that I'm slightly different. But to hear this from a high-level politician who hasn't got a clue about what he's talking about is just horrifying. And that's from Dave in Leicester. And that's the point, isn't it? This is coming from the Health Secretary of the United States of America. It doesn't get much more high level than that when you're talking about health matters. It's extraordinary. We are living in the most bizarre timeline. Something weird has happened. This one from Andrew says, does RFK Jr know that the world's richest man, Elon Musk, is autistic, Asperger's, with Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos having strong autistic traits? Quite. And I suspect they can probably go to the toilet on their own, or they may, because they got so much money, choose not to. I don't know. Jim the taxi says, I'm 57 years old and I was diagnosed with autism 5 weeks ago. I've raised 4 children, bought my own house, been self-employed most of my working life, been a director and a chairman of a small limited company. I've even managed to use a toilet on a daily basis. Congratulations, Jem. That's great. RFK Jr is talking rubbish and someone should remind him that Elon Musk is autistic. I'm pretty sure he's done okay in life. And that's from Jeremy in Bournemouth. Jeremy, congratulations on the toilet thing, though. It's good. Henry is in Rugby. Hello, Henry.
Hello, Petrie. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well.
Good.
But I just wanted to call and say that I'm 53, and I was diagnosed with autism 18 months ago.
Okay.
So it was a sort of an official diagnosis. But I'm quite successful. I mean, I want to spread the word that actually I'm a multi-millionaire, and I have homes in New York, and I've just sold my holiday home, and I've just sold my place in London. And I just want to say that you can be autistic. You can maybe draw on those strengths, and you can make the most of them, and you can actually make a massive success of yourself. I'm not saying it's easy, because your last caller made me laugh. I mean, she was wonderful, because she explained a lot of the things, a lot of the problems I have in life, a lot of the issues I have, and a lot of the little niggles I have, but you can get through them. And I think even if you're autistic, you can have a wonderful life, and you can have a successful life with an understanding partner maybe, and you can make it. I don't see why it should be something where you can't go to the toilet, or you can't.
I was just going to say, are you able to go to the toilet unaided?
It's ridiculous.
I know. I mean, I found it so offensive. I mean, so unbelievably offensive.
It is. And I think, I mean, I have problems with things, just things in life and interacting with life. And because I'm, I think of things differently, but I've used that in the way I've approached life. I've made my money from turning companies around, because I look at things differently within a company. I see things differently than the CEO was seeing them, or the management team, or the board was seeing things, and so I could turn things on their head and give them ways forward that they didn't ever think of. So, I've been quite expensive in doing that, and I've not taken the mickey, but I've actually proved myself, and I've been successful over 20 odd years doing it in London. So, I think, why not? Use your skill.
I mean, but that's what the rest of us have to do as well, right? I mean, I always knew that I had to work at something that had a deadline, because otherwise I'm a terrible prevaricator. I will fluff around and do everything, but not the thing I meant to do. So I always knew whatever I did, it had to be something that had a deadline, and I have to be in the studio at 10 o'clock, and I leave it at 1 o'clock, right? That is my pattern. Otherwise, I'm all over the place. So you use that skill. I'm a communicator. I love to ask questions. All of those things. So most of us do that. So I don't see what should be so different with autism, because of course you will have the ability to look at something, turn it upside down, and think in a way that other people don't. But that's what we need. That we've got artists who can do that. And, how many brilliant artists have been autistic?
Yeah, that's right.
And mathematicians and professors, teachers, and that. If it wasn't for autism, we would be lacking that. We wouldn't have that in this world.
Yes. I mean, I think, I don't know, because I don't know what a sort of non-neural, untypical person is like, but I can tell you that the way I see things, the way I sit in meetings and talk about things, people look at me with wide eyes going, oh, yes, of course, that's different. We can do it that way. But because I'm looking at things from a different point of view.
Yeah.
So, and I can make money from that, and I can have a great life from that. Why not? It's like Michelangelo or Leonardo.
Completely right.
Was new, they made their money from that. They made their life from that.
You're not telling me that Picasso didn't have he must have been neurodivergent, because you can't see a face in that way. You can't muddle up those things without having that and what we call genius is just perhaps neurodivergence, right?
And look what's added to non-divergent, neurodivergent lives. It's people look at that and go, isn't that fascinating?
Isn't that amazing?
Exactly.
Amazing,
different.
Yeah.
And so it's adding to everybody's life, you know. And I don't want to, I won't say names, but there are names of people that are currently living in society that are adding to society. And from when I look at them, I think you're obviously autistic, but I don't want to label them, but and they're adding to people's lives.
Of course.
In financial services,
what do you think of the idea, though, that
history.
autism is a disease that can be cured?
I think in future, I think it may be cured. There may be something that will change it will stop it happening, but I don't think
that's not the same as a cure, though, is it? That would just if it is genetic, that will be something that is prevented from happening. But what a loss to society if that happens.
It would be a loss.
It would be.
It would be. It would be, because what it would end up with being is people would be white, everyone would be monochrome, everyone would be like normal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like everyone would be the same, and everyone would be clones, and everyone would be, you wouldn't have those fascinating people who see life in a very juxtaposition way.
Absolutely. And I don't want it fixed in that way. Yeah, I don't want it fixed in that way, because like you said, there are people with autism who are adding to, theatre, film, arts, science, all sorts.
Fashion,
I mean, look at science. Just to have somebody who can flip a problem on its head scientifically and find another way of doing something.
That's right.
We can't exist as a species without that ability.
And I'd like to make a point as well that AI can't be autistic. So AI can't be that no one has ever said that AI can be autistic. And so I think if AI takes over, that is losing that sort of that creativity in life, that that extra bit of something that changes things, like punk changes something, or the sort of hippie of the 60s changed things, or New Romantics or something. There's no difference, and so I worry that AI would make things very put things in a blender and make it smoothie, and we'd end up with sort of American sitcoms forever.
And God help us.
And that just sort of worries me a little bit.
But Henry,
I
completely agree with you, and I think that if we start to sort of normalise everybody's brain, we are really stuck as a species. We'll never move on. Henry, brilliant call. Thank you. I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much indeed. A quick break. Back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a very good morning. It's Petrie here with you for the next 10 minutes or so. And we're talking about autism, and the Health Secretary of the United States, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., really being quite disparaging of autism and people with autism, and the idea that it can be cured, that they're going to find out what causes it, and it's a disease, a preventable disease. But as we were just saying to Henry there, what happens if we do prevent it? What are the unintended consequences of preventing something like autism? The unintended consequences of losing thinkers like Henry, losing thinkers even like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or any of the others that may, Zuckerberg, who may be on that spectrum somewhere. Those people who look at the world in a different way, who are able to upend everything we know and create something from that. What would have happened to science without hyper-focused, obsessive, brilliant minds with autism? What would have happened to art? And you look at a piece of art and you go, how did they think of that? Like Picasso is the one that comes to my mind. Or Van Gogh. Who sees the sky in that way? Who paints from somewhere else? Who looks at the world in that way and is able to translate that to a beautiful piece of work? What are the unintended consequences of preventing autism in the future, where we're all neurotypical? I'm not sure that's a good world. I'm not sure that's going to be in the least bit interesting or even advance us in any way. Because neurotypical thinkers think typically. They don't tend to think outside the box. They don't tend to think in the way that Henry is able to do, walk into an organisation and go, right, I can see what you're doing wrong, but you can't see it because you're all thinking in the same way. It's an interesting question. I mean, yes, there are people who are living lives that are probably quite difficult with autism, at the very, the far end of the spectrum. But we support those people, and it doesn't mean their lives are useless or worthless or valueless in any way. It just means they need some more support. But if we cure it, what are we taking away from humanity? What are we taking away from the world? It's a question. It's a good question. Charlie is in London. Hi, Charlie.
Hello. Hi. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Hi. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. It's fascinating, this, isn't it?
It is. And someone who, I don't have autism, but I have ADHD, and I'm classed as, in inverted commas, neurodivergent. I think that people don't necessarily understand that it's not necessarily about being autistic or having ADHD, because, I mean, we've just been told that this is how we are. We've been made to feel different. It's the struggles that you go through behind closed doors. So we can have, I mean, you've got, like you mentioned, with, Picasso, whatever, and, Einstein, maybe they was, had autism or had ADHD or whatever. How would we know? Because it wasn't apparent then. It wasn't a thing that would have been recognized. Yeah. And I think now there are such wide spectrums and there's no understanding. And RFK, to slam autism, wasn't he the person that said, well, that's to do with having vaccines and
which was debunked.
Genetic so now all of a sudden there's going to be a cure. Well, if there's going to be a cure for everything, shouldn't it be cancer or something more important? And like, who is he?
I agree.
To say anything. You're not even an MP in this country. You don't stand for anything that our country should stand for, and everything that our country stands for at the moment is quite, shocking. And we're constantly controlled and being put in these boxes. I'm trying to do a law degree. I have a daughter that suffers from not, emotional-based avoidance from going to school. She's got anxiety. She's got this. She's got that. But that's what I'm being told, and so I'm dealing with that. So if I wanted to go out in the world and, you know, even get a job right now, I'm not even reliable because I have to be at home with, you know, my daughter and the struggles that we face, and that I'm trying to support her, and then I'm trying to get the support. It's very difficult, and I think, you know, autism is on such a wide spectrum, and, you know, to say that someone can't, you know, go to the toilet on their own, and, you know, that might not be because they're necessarily autistic. It might be because they don't have the right support or the right family network around them that can help with something that they're not able to manage, which could be something so minimal, so minor, you know. And it's like, where does this end? Where do we get a gauge on this? Where do we now come to a point where we're like, we need to, you know, really get a hold on this, because everything is so out there. We've got so much going on in the world with, you know, the transgender, you know, pandemic of that, I'm going to say, you know, autism. And it's not that people can't go in the world and work. It's, you know, it's not that people can't. It's because there's lack of support. There's lack of understanding. You can't label someone as something and then say, well, that's
you're on your own. Yeah,
get on with it. You're
I mean,
on your
and
own
that is the thing, isn't it? That there are people in varying degrees in this world who need support for varying things. It might be physical, it might be emotional, it might be psychological, it might be neurological. Look, you know, we are all different, and I just wish this world didn't just try to force us all into this sausage factory.
Exactly, and the personal things that I went through, I feel like, right, I'm 42, so just finally going to university and not even thinking that was something I would be able to do, that's only when it got highlighted that I was dyslexic and then had ADHD. But that made so much sense for the last 30 odd years of my life in school, how I was in social circles, you know, how people, and, you know, once you've got that label, that's the other thing that you have to deal with. Oh, well, you know, you're ADHD, so you butt in or you talk. And it's like, no, I'm not trying to do that. I'm always trying to monitor my behaviour to fit in with the right way of society, because I'm not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
Just because I overtalk or just because I butt in doesn't make me a bad person. I'm not being rude. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. And definitely the one thing is, when the last person that spoke said about AI has many formats that, for me, I don't always feel comfortable in asking questions about something that I don't understand.
Fair enough.
And if I put it into AI, say, explain this, or what does this mean, or what am I being asked, it really breaks it down for me and helps me understand. And I shouldn't have to use AI to understand something simple that is simple to everyone else, but it's not to me. Just to have an understanding, and
but
just
that's
to
the
make
thing.
sure that I'm getting it right.
Had you been diagnosed earlier in your life, then those things could have been put in place for you. I don't know if you were listening at the beginning of the show, where the mum with her daughter who's a nurse, you know, she knew that there was something, and she had to explain to her about things like butting into conversations, or about, you know, reading the room, or about understanding certain things. And had that been in your life earlier, then maybe you wouldn't have had to turn to AI. And that is all it is. It's all just about being supportive of people's difference.
Exactly. And the other thing is, it's like, when does someone say, instead of me always having to think, right, I better not say that because I've got ADHD or they've got autism, when does it become, you know, on the flip side, when someone says, do you know what? They might not actually be rude. Maybe it's because they've got autism. Let me give them what they need, and let me answer their question, or let me try and understand what they're trying to gauge. Because if that happens, I don't think you could come to a negative. You could actually be a positive, because it's just about understanding.
It's just a different way of communicating, right? And understanding each other, and allowing different forms of communication.
Yeah, and I think that's all that's missing. Just because someone has a different way of interpreting a question that they're being asked doesn't mean they're being rude or being offensive. It just means they don't interpret it in the same way.
Yeah. And we all know that awkward person who doesn't quite read the room, doesn't quite get the cues, doesn't quite understand. And most of us are accommodating to that, right? But to people who aren't accommodating, then that would be annoying. But instead of trying to understand that this person is clearly neurodivergent.
Yeah, I mean, half the time, you know, I'm someone that can come across quite confident and be quite outspoken, but actually inside I'm so anxious. I hate being in public settings. I hate
your brain is having to work twice the speed or three times the speed of mine just to read the room properly or to try and understand what people are. Whereas I just take it for granted that I will understand those cues. I can pick up on those cues. But for you, you're obviously you're having to almost translate it. So it's like speaking in a different language. So you're translating all the time.
Yeah, and it's so, you know, difficult. Even when, you know, it can be quite embarrassing as well, because it's like, okay, I understand what was said, but I just can't interpret. Can you explain that